All right. Welcome, Notre Dame fans, to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. I am Vince D'Addario. That is Brian Driscoll, and we got something special today, which neither one of us were anticipating this time yesterday, I would say. We had, once again, and many of you have noticed this already, we were planning to do the Toledo-Purdue preview, and it once again gets pushed to another day because we've got something better for you today. And it seems like every time we play in the Toledo-Purdue preview, we find like something amazing happens and we need to push it. So maybe we just need to keep planning that, and we'll just keep getting great interviews. I think that's
Yeah. Well, and then, of course, today we're going to be joined by – well, we're not going to be joined by Notre Dame defensive coordinator Marcus Freeman. I just wrapped up an interview with Coach Freeman here a little bit ago, and we're going to play that. It's over 30 minutes long. We're going to play that interview for you, which huge thanks to Katie Lonergan, who's the SID for the Notre Dame football program, for setting up the interviews with Coach Reese and Coach Freeman. I knew this interview was going to happen, but with everything going on, the when was the question.
Right.
And so she's been working hard. You know, they had the grill and chill, which was the barbecue. They're getting ready for fall camp, which starts next week. So it's been a very busy time. So appreciate her working hard to get those interviews set up. And then, of course, thanks to Coach Reese and Coach Freeman for spending the time to sit down with us in turning what was supposed to be, 15, 20-minute interviews to 30-plus minute interviews. So, you guys all know me. We get a chance to talk ball. And look, we took a little different approach than we've seen. Coaches talked a lot about what got them to Notre Dame and that whole process. And I wanted to focus more on the job here,
focusing on ball, baby.
The expectation. Yeah. So we talked philosophy, we talked personnel, we talked specific players. It was a great interview. And as expected, he was him and Coach Reese both are just really intelligent guys. Gave really good answers. Coach Reese didn't give us any fluff, and Coach Freeman didn't give us any fluff. Right. And I think you all are going to enjoy this one very, very much. Very, very much. And we also have some exciting news too, which I'm very excited about. If you look down at the if you look down in the description bar of the YouTube thing, you'll see a link there for Built Bar, which is a protein bar that I think is absolutely amazing. And my mom made me try this recently. And I'm like, look, I don't do protein bars. They taste terrible. And I like sweet things. And it was amazing. And I've now bought several of them, like boxes of them, and it's really healthy. It's a great product. But what we did is I reached out to Built Bar and said, hey, I want to do something with you guys because I love your product. And so we have a thing now where if anytime you buy Built Bar, if you use the promo code Irish Breakdown, one word, if you use the promo code Irish Breakdown and to buy from them, you get 10% off your entire purchase. So wanted to do that for you guys because it is a product that I love. I will never eat another candy bar. They are that sweet. They are that good. And it's 130 calories for the whole thing. Over 20% of the fiber that you need on your dietary fiber you need. So amazing products. I'm very excited about that. So this is a great day for me all around. A product that I've been hoping we could work with because I love the product, but then also we get a chance to interview Marcus Freeman. So this is going to be really good. But look, nobody right now, people, it's the Built Bar thing's exciting, but people want to hear from Coach Freeman. Yes. So Vince, let's go ahead and get that rocking and rolling. And we'll talk about it afterwards. We'll talk about some of the things he mentioned, and then we'll open it up to questions, and people are allowed to ask about it if they want to, or talk about what other things. So let's get rolling. Notre Dame fans, welcome back to a special edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. My name is Brian Driscoll. I'm the publisher at irishbreakdown.com, and we have a special guest today. We're going to be sitting down talking ball with Notre Dame defensive coordinator Marcus Freeman. Coach Freeman, thank you so much for joining the show today.
Thanks for having me, Brian, man. I look forward to getting on here talking a little ball.
Yes, that's what I want to do, Coach. A lot of the questions this summer that you've been getting, and the interviews have gone over incredibly well. The one you did with Coach Chris Zorich went incredibly well. A lot of stuff about how you got to Notre Dame and that process. But, Coach, you know me, I want to talk ball. So those are great stories, but I want to talk some ball. So let's start off with this, Coach. You and I are at a coach's clinic. And I introduce you in front of the coach's clinic, and the first thing you're asked to do is, just in a general sense, what is your defensive philosophy? So independent of 3-3-4 versus or 3-3-5 versus 4-2-5 versus whatever else, just your overall defensive philosophy, what would you say that it is?
Well, I think we break it down to this. We are front multiplicity, coverage consistency. And so that's kind of philosophy in everything we do here. Okay, is we want to be multiple up front. We want to be a 3-down team. We want to be a 4-down team. We want to, stem. We want to be a 4-eye team. All these different terminologies, but we're going to move and do different things up front. And then we want to be consistent in the coverages that we play. We don't want to have 1,000 different coverages. We're going to have multiple coverages, but we're not going to try to confuse you with playing 10 coverages. We're going to be consistent in the 5, 6 coverages that we play so that our guys can play fast and they can understand exactly what we're doing and exactly how teams try to attack us. And that's going to help us play faster.
Now, you brought up, I was going to talk about this later, but you kind of went into it now. So let's, if you don't mind me kind of transitioning into that, you talked coverages, breaking down film at Cincinnati. There was obviously some multiplicity there. You weren't like lined up in cover one every single snap, but you were aggressive with your coverages. Is that something that's a part of your philosophy? Was that basically more on that's just the person they had at Cincinnati? And if it is kind of what you want to be, do you feel like you have inherited a roster at Notre Dame that allows you to kind of just keep right at that, or do you have to adjust some things to fit what you have?
Yeah, I think there's going to be some similarities, that the things we did at Cincinnati that we'll do here, but there's also going to be some differences because of our personnel and because of what our guys do well. We want to be an aggressive group, though. That's not going to change. That's our mentality. We want to dictate. Okay. And what we do is we say we got this thing called challenge everything. And a part of that mantra of challenge everything is the way we play defense. And I hope our guys feel like, hey, Coach Freeman's an aggressive coach. We're going to be an aggressive unit. Yes, does that mean play man? Yeah, but it doesn't mean we're going to play man every snap. We're going to play some zone. We're going to do different things, but I still want to be able to challenge you. I'm not going to drop 8 guys in the coverage and say, hey, let them throw it in front of us and let's just break down and tackle it. No, we want to challenge routes. We want to challenge our opponents, and we want to make them earn everything they get.
When we got a chance to interview the players in the spring, there was a lot of talk about things being simplified, and that can often get misconstrued as you guys like have 2 calls and you just kind of run to the ball. What I kind of want to hear from you, Coach, is, how do you balance as a coach being complex enough to be able to have all the answers that you would need in a game versus making things simplified enough to allow your players to execute at a high level? Because you and I both know that ultimately at the end of the day is the most important thing. You can have all the chalkboard or whiteboard answers you have, but if the players can't execute it. So how do you balance, those 2 needs when you go into playing the kind of schedule that you're going to be playing this year?
It's been a long time since I used a chalkboard. I might have been elementary, so I like that you changed.
Well, we talked about where I started coaching. You're very familiar. We had chalkboards, right? So.
No doubt, man. But, I think if you look back at our last 3 years at Cincinnati, okay, and you saw the success we had statistically and as a defense. And I think if you went back and you asked those players, hey, what is it about Coach Freeman's defense that you enjoyed? And I think they would say it's simplified or whatever. You can play fast, and that's what I believe in. And I believe in this, and that this is a personnel driven game. And anybody that tells you otherwise, I think I want to see exactly what they're doing to have some success, because I bet you their players are extremely talented and they play extremely hard. And that's what I believe in, man. I believe in we have to continue to develop the talent we have, and we have to continue to try to bring in the best players that we can find that fit Notre Dame, because ultimately those are the guys that have to go out there and be better than their opponent. And yes, we want to have a good scheme that takes away what the offense is doing well. Yes, we want to have a scheme that isn't just you go and you know exactly what we're doing, but at the end of the day, we're not going to win because we out-schemed our opponent. That's not what I want to do. That's not what I believe. And I believe we have a sound scheme. I believe that we're multiple in the things we do. But at the end of the day, we're going to win because our guys are coached better, developed better, and they execute exactly what their assignment is better than their opponent. And so that's, to me, the keys to our success.
When you've talked about your defense, kind of big picture, and when people especially ask about the defensive line, you've made the comment that we're a defensive line driven defense. And I've heard you say that multiple times now. Can you explain, Coach, kind of what that means and what does that look like? Practically speaking, what does that look like?
Yeah, I was just talking about this with the D staff, and that in all the years of either being a coordinator or coaching football, the most successful defense I've been a part of, it was because we had a really good D line. And that's what I want our guys to understand, is that our D line can erase a lot of mistakes from guys behind them. There can be a wide open receiver. There can be a hole that all of a sudden this D lineman makes a play and it's like, oh man, look at this great defensive call. No, it's just a D lineman whooping somebody's tail. And as long we are deep at D line here. And I believe that that's probably the strongest unit we have on our defense right now. You know, and it's for sure the most experienced unit. And with a strong D line, I believe the guys behind them have opportunities to catch up to that talent level or catch up to that experience level. And we will always be a D line driven program and a D line driven defense. And that's going to be what we hang our hat on.
So when you're putting together your, what your responsibilities are for the second level and your coverage, aspects, I know that the specific talent of those positions goes into that, but does the talent or I say talent probably is not the right word, but the ability of your front to be disruptive, does that then impact, or how much does that impact sort of then what you do at levels 2 and 3 of your defense?
Yeah. I mean, the simplest thing the simplest example is to show you that if you have D linemen that can defeat one-on-one blocks, then you don't really have to pressure to get pressure on the quarterback. You don't have to blitz to get pressure on the quarterback, right? If all of a sudden, hey, your 4 D linemen, okay, are getting blocked by 4 O linemen and they got an extra guy, well, in order to get pressure on a quarterback, you're going to have to bring a 5th or 6th rusher, okay? And so that's a huge aspect of it. If we can get 4-man pass rush, okay, when that quarterback drops back and he's looking down the field and he's uncomfortable, then that puts an extra guy in the coverage. Okay, but all of a sudden, if you can't get 4-man pass rush, you need to blitz 5. Well, then guess what? You're going to be getting hopefully more pressure, but also you're going to have some vulnerabilities in the back end. There's going to be more holes, and so it's basic math. And that hey, if we can get pressure and we can create havoc with 4 guys up front, then there's a lot of different things we can do in coverage with 7 guys.
Does that then make your blitz packages more impactful because this is an expression I've used in the past, is when you can blitz because you want to, not because you have to? Does it then does it then say, okay, well, when we do blitz now, it's more impactful because we're able to eat up more gaps and more blockers? Does that kind of factor into it or not?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now that you don't feel like you have to blitz to get pressure on the quarterback, now when you decide to bring pressure, I think offenses can continue to be off track. Well, if they know, hey, he only way he's going to get pressure on the quarterback is if he blitzes guys. Well, they know, hey, when it's a passing down, he's probably going to blitz because he needs to get pressure on the quarterback. But all of a sudden, you don't know when now. Now we can keep you off track, keep you off bounds. We can blitz first, second, third down. It doesn't matter. We cannot blitz and still get pressure and be effective. And so that goes back to the whole philosophy that we have to have a strong D-line to have success on defense.
You look at the linebackers, obviously. Well, actually, this will probably set up the linebacker talk a little bit better. But, since you've been hired, there's the conversation of 4-2-5 versus 3-3-5 versus 3-4 personnel, all those different things that we like to spend a lot of time on. When you look at those different things, and you talked about multiplicity, so the answer to that is, are you going to be 4-2-5, 3-3-5, 3-4? Let me guess, your answer is yes, right?
Yes to every single one.
but what are the things that go into determining what your emphasis is going to be? Is it a combination of, or one of these things, which is personnel driven? Obviously, your personnel. Is it going to be basically, okay, we may do one thing versus USC, but another thing versus Wisconsin, or is it going to kind of like everybody's going to see everything?
There's going to be things we hang our hat on, and I think you have to have that. I think you have to have a staple. I think you have to have a base defense. And if you can't stop an offense in base defense, right, then all of a sudden, really, you're really just guessing. You're guessing. And so we have to be able to hang our hat on some type of base defense. But I think when you look to each team and you look to game plan, you say, hey, where are there, 1, deficiencies, right? Where can we attack? But 2, what do they do really, really well? And how can we stop that? You want to make a team be left-handed, right? And we use that term just to make them do things that they don't love to do. And that's when I go back to the mindset of we want to be able to dictate to the offense and not be dictated from the offense. And so I think we look at each week, hey, what are the deficiencies? What do they do really, really well? How can we attack the deficiencies? And how can we try to stop the things they do really well? And then try to see how that fits within our scheme, right? Hey, this week it might look like 3-3-5. Mm-hmm. Okay, it might look like 4-2-5. What do we need to do to make sure we're stopping the things they do well and attacking what they don't?
One of the advantages to playing in a conference is a lot of times you see the same teams over and over again. And in some instances, it's not completely true, but you're going to see certain big picture philosophies over and over again when you play in a conference. At Notre Dame, however, you're going to play an AAC one week, a Big Ten the next week, a Pac-12 the next, Navy the next. How important is it? Is it even more important to have that multiplicity to where if we need to be 3 down one week to thrive, we can be that, and if the next week we need to be 4 down more, we can thrive because of just the vast difference in sort of philosophies and schemes you're going to see week to week, as opposed to maybe. And again, it's not teams you're seeing every year, right? Like if you're in the AAC, yeah, you play different offenses every week, but it's, a lot of the same teams year after year. We have a book on them. How important is that when you play this kind of cross country schedule and then the unique schedules every year at Notre Dame?
I think one of the more important things we have to do is start preparing when we have more time, right? And so in the summer, being able to kind of go through your schedule and look and see, hey, where are the uniquely different offenses at, and who are you playing that this offense is going to be unique in terms of what they're going to do, and how do we, within our scheme, within our package, find a defense that fits us well to take away what they're going to do. And obviously, you have the Navies. The triple option defense is going to be completely different than anything else you've done. Okay, but then you have the RPOs, the air raid type UCFs, the USCs and the North Carolinas, and even, then you got your traditional, you can have a quarterback that can run versus a quarterback can throw. Cincinnati obviously has a dual threat guy. And then Toledo's a 11, 12, one of the top offenses in the MAC. And I'm just talking, the list goes on and on. Then you play Wisconsin. You're going to get 12, 11, 13, shift, motion. And it's like, man, you have to have plans. So what I like to do is in the summer kind of sit down with the staff and we'll game plan a little bit, take really good notes, and be able, once we get to that, we can say, hey, when we looked at this in the summer, here's the kind of thoughts we had going into this game. Now, where are we at? Right, we could be a completely different defense, okay, by the time we play some of these teams. But I think what it does is helps give you ideas for what you think would be in your benefit, obviously, as you go into that game.
You talked about UNC and USC and UNC back to back. You have them in back to back games. They're both air raid teams, but this is what makes, I think, defensive coaching challenging. Is there's the air raid version that USC runs where they were under 100 yards rushing a game last year, and then there's the air raid version that North Carolina did, who had 2,000-yard running backs. So it's not like you can say, okay, back-to-back air raids, game plan here will be the one we use next week. And that's what I think, especially for defensive coordinators, that can make it very challenging because you can't just say West Coast because, Mike Shanahan's West Coast is going to look a lot different than John Gruden's West Coast. You can't just say air raid because, Mike Leach's air raid is going to look a lot different than Phil Longo's air raid.
That's right. And it's still that, I think, Brian, it still comes down to personnel. You know what I mean? And you say all those things, and I wonder why Phil Longo ran for so many yards last year.
It's called Javonte Williams and
exactly right. Exactly right. And that's why I think what intelligent coaches do is they put their best players in positions to be successful, right? And they do things. If you got a really good player, you know what? Utilize them, because no scheme for account for somebody going and put their hands on somebody, throwing them to the ground, getting off a block and making a tackle. Well, the scheme looked good. It wasn't a scheme. That ain't anything I called. It's my guy whooping your guy, And so that's why, again, recruiting's so important. That's why developing that guy is so important. That's why having the best players on the field are so important.
When you're a first-year coordinator, how challenging can it be to sort of put your package together as you're still learning your personnel? Or is this one of those years you have to rely even more on Mike Mickens and more on Mike Elson and Chris O'Leary, guys who've been in the system, maybe know these players? Or do you feel like you can study film and then you have spring ball that you can have you can go into fall camp feeling like you have a pretty good idea of who you are?
Yeah, it's funny you said first year coordinator. I thought back to 2017. Okay, in 2017, and this is going to answer the question you just had, but 2017, you're hired as the defense coordinator at Cincinnati, and you think you have all the answers. You're 30 years old, and we have all these different coverages, and I'm in front of the room, and I'm telling everybody, this is what we're doing, the D-line, linebackers, the safeties, the corners, everybody, this is what we're doing. I'm the coordinator, and you finish 96 in the country at defense, right? And so you have to figure out some things that are going to help you have more success, you're going to be fired. And so one of the things we changed was what we call unit strength here. Is that, hey man, the D-line coach, head coach, D-line, linebacker coach, head coach, and linebackers, corner, safety is the same thing. And so that is something that I feel is important for our success in the way I lead. In that, hey, Elston, I'm going to lean on Elston really, really hard to make sure that I know what's going to be best for the D-line and their personnel, what they do well. Same thing with Mike Mickens at corner. Same thing with Chris O'Leary at safety. Okay, and that, man, I have to depend on my staff. I have to depend on these guys I work with. They're professionals at what they do. Okay, and I trust them, and they're really good at what they do, or they wouldn't be coaches at Notre Dame. Okay, and so I really depend on these guys. I utilize them, and this is a group thing. We're doing this thing together. This is not Marcus Freeman's deep. This is us together, putting our heads together and figuring out what's going to help our rooms and our defense have success.
Obviously, you're just not the D coordinator. I mean, you don't just get a roam practice all day, with the bird's eye view. You also have to work with the linebackers.
Yeah.
Sort of, when you look at a sort of big picture, what role do linebackers have in this defense? Because we talk a lot about the defensive line driven, and then there's the aggressive coverage schemes, and then there's this group in the middle. That when I studied you guys last year, Sanders got a lot of attention, Ahmad Gardner got a lot of attention, but I'm watching your linebackers. I'm saying these guys are a pretty important part to what they're doing. Mm-hmm. What's the role of the linebackers in this defense, or in how you utilize them? What role they have, what's their emphasis have to be when you're talking about when this defense is really clicking, this is what the linebackers are being asked to do and what they're doing well.
I think a unique thing about our defense is obviously the coordinator is the linebackers coach. And sometimes I try to coach them from a coordinator's point of view. I want them to know what I'm thinking, why I'm thinking it, what I'm calling, why I'm calling it. Because now what the linebackers can do is try to do little things that help other positions, right? Hey, the safety has this guy, man, but we want to make sure we give him some help. So you should be standing here. This is why I'm calling. Hey, this pressure, the D lineman's doing this. So if you show right here, the D lineman can get free and you can come off behind him and different. I'm just trying to give you different examples, but what I hope they can do is be an extension of me, right? Their number one job is to be a great linebacker, okay? If they hear it over and over and over from a coordinator's point of view, which is a lot of times the way I coach and I teach and I watch film, I think what they can do is be a extension of me, but help every position have success, right? Do little things that, are going to help each position be able to accomplish their job.
Coach, and when you look at your linebackers, sort of what's your impression of where things stand with that group heading into fall camp? You've got a lot of guys that have played, maybe not a ton of guys that have started for a long period of time, but you have a lot of guys that can play. What's your impression about where things stand? What are the things you feel this unit is going to do well, and what are some of the things that you're going to have to spend the next 25 or whatever practices, getting that group better at as you get ready for Florida State?
Yeah, I think it's a deep position. I think it's a position where you got a lot of guys in that room that can play, that have played some ball. Obviously, Drew White started the most games, but you got a lot of guys that have played some ball for Notre Dame. And the unique challenge for me is going to be able to, how do I get these guys on the field? Because we have more than just 3 guys or 2 guys that can just play, right? And so how do we get these guys on the field? How do we make sure that we're playing at a high level no matter who's on the field, right? It's that natural instinct, that natural selfishness that can creep into you, right? And that's a huge challenge of mine. It's going to be a huge challenge of many coaches on our defense, is that, hey, how do we continue to get the what's best for me out of me and keep this room, okay, doing for what's best for the room. And that's one of my huge challenges, because we have a lot of talent and we have a lot of guys that can play and a lot of guys that want to play. But at the same time, we have to make sure, man, that we can only play 3 linebackers at once. We might have 6, 7 guys that can play. You only play 3, okay? And so that's my biggest challenge. Is I'm extremely satisfied with the talent we have. It's being able to get them on the field, and when they're not on the field, make sure that, hey, there's nothing more important than the production and the success of this defense.
I have a bit of a follow-up on that, Coach. Obviously, the preference for any coach is you want all your guys to be able to do everything well, right? But that's not always the reality. Is it possible, because it sounds great sitting in a podcast on a Tuesday afternoon just talking about it, well, this guy does this well, this guy does this well, so you can just kind of put them in there and do those kind of things. At the same time, if you do that too much, teams will know, okay, that guy only does this well. But is it possible for you to take, whether it be a veteran or a younger guy that says, hey, maybe he's not a great all-around player, but he does this one or two things really well. Can you fit that into your scheme, or does it limit you? I mean, how can you kind of look at those different strengths of players and say, hey, we can use that on a Saturday?
Yeah, you got to find, I think one thing I take pride in is finding figuring out what these guys do well, right? I think it's easy to look at a kid, and if he's not the All-American or he's not the no-brainer starter, and say, he's not good enough. We missed. Right there. There's a reason why these kids are at Notre Dame. They all have talent. They all were really successful in high school. And it's our job to make sure that we figure out what that kid can do well and put him in a position to do it well. Now, you're not going to hurt your defense. A kid only blitzes well, okay, then blitz him, but also make sure that you're moving them to different places and making sure that, hey, they don't know what he's doing or exactly where he's going every time he's in the game. But I think that's a challenge of ours. And that's something I'm really hard on, is just to make sure, hey, find out what he does well. Let's figure it out. Let's figure out what these kids do well and put them in a position to have success instead of saying he's not good enough. Okay, and that's a huge challenge of us coaches, is to make sure we really dive in deep to these kids and figure out, hey, what are the things that they do really well.
I had a final linebacker question for you, Coach. Is you look at the Rover depth chart, you obviously got Jack Kaiser and Paul Mawala, Isaiah Pryor. I'm not sure if Prince Colley's going to be there or not. I'm not quite sure where he's going to start out at. But is it easier for them to kind of step into the quote-unquote Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah's shoes because it's not the same defense, or it's a different coordinator, or does that pressure remain the same no matter what? Because, they're not being technically asked to run the same thing because it's a different coordinator and a different defense. But does that pressure still remain the same, or does it kind of take a little bit of that burden off, knowing that, this is a kind of a fresh start kind of thing?
Yeah, I've told the Rovers this from the beginning, is that there's only one Jeremiah Owusu, and you're not going to replace Jeremiah Owusu with one guy, right? He's a unique talent. He's an exceptional football player. And what we have to do is replace his production. That could be with two guys. That could be with three guys. That could be with one guy. I don't know. This is going to be how you continue to develop these guys. But I hope they all have that competitive nature where they put the pressure on themselves. Like, I want to be Jeremiah Owusu. I want to be the guy that's on the field that everybody fears. I want to be the guy that never comes off the field, because that's, to me, the competitiveness that drives us all to be great. And that's what I challenge these guys to understand. Hey, we can't be selfish, but we can be greedy. Okay, we can want the most. We can want all the success. We can want to never come off the field. But the minute it turns to greed, the minute it turns into selfishness instead of being greedy, okay, that's when all of a sudden you put your own success ahead of the unit or ahead of the team, and we can't do that. So it is a challenge to them. I think they all personally challenge themselves. It's a challenge for me to make sure we replace the production of Jeremiah Owusu with the guys we have, because he was a huge part of this defense last year. But you know what I mean? At the same time, we got to make sure that the expectations don't change no matter who's on the field.
We kind of started this thing early on talking about defensive line driven and being able to make individual plays and win. Obviously, we've seen a lot of Kurt Hinish over the years at Notre Dame. We've seen a lot of Myron Tungavaloa. So even though he's going to look a little different, be playing in a little different position this year. Two guys I wanted to ask you about that one is Jason Adamiola, obviously a guy that's been sort of a rotation player. As you look for, guys that can win those one-on-one matchups, what's your message to him been as far as what kind of player he can be in that kind of role, and what kind of expectations there are for him in that position also to say, look, because this is what I've always felt, the guys that are closest to the quarterback are the dudes in the middle, right? And with the advent of quick game and things like that, if you can get pressure right up the middle, it's going to be disruptive against the run and the pass. He's a guy that can kind of be that. What's your thoughts on? That's my impression. What is your thoughts on him? What is your expectation of him, and kind of what's your message been to him as he steps into a more prominent role this year, or is pushing to step into a more prominent role, I should say.
Yeah, Jason had an unbelievable spring. And I didn't know much about him. I mean, again, you watch a little bit of film, you watch last year's film, and you know he sticks out. I mean, he's a guy that was productive when he was on the field, and he's a guy that plays at a high level. And the most impressive thing I loved about Jason from the 15 practice spring is the effort that he practices with. And there's no wonder you see some of those plays in the game where he's chasing the guy from Florida State down. He does a helicopter. Like, well, he does that in practice. And so, again, he's going to have a prominent role on this defense. And he's going to be a huge reason why we have success. And I don't know how many plays he's going to play. I don't care if it's 30, 40, whatever we need. But we just want to make sure those plays that he's in the game, that he's playing at a high level. And that comes from preparing at a high level.
I think a guy on the defensive line that is a bit of an enigma at this point in time, maybe that might not be the right word, but that's Isaiah Foskey. Because if you're talking about, okay, I'm going to draw up a lineman in a lab, he's going to be about 6'5", 250, really long arms and really athletic. Oh, that kind of fits Isaiah Foskey, but he's also a guy that really, until Notre Dame convinced him to play D-line, was a guy that people thought was going to be a tight end. So he's still an evolving guy. Have you seen any growth from him from kind of day one to now? And what are the areas that he needs to continue to grow to turn that potential into production?
Yeah. Foskey's probably one of maybe two players that had the biggest growth from the start of spring practice to the end of spring practice. And it's again, he's a guy with super high expectations. And probably one of the big reasons is because of the way he looks. I mean, he looks like a Greek god. I mean, it's unbelievable. You've sculptured an actual perfect defensive end for what we're asking him to do. And so he's continuing to he's been here for a couple years, but he hasn't had a whole bunch of game reps. I don't consider him a veteran. And so I know Elston's been working extremely hard with him on the technique aspect of playing defensive line. He's still relatively new, as you said, to the position and still learning, but all the tools are there. And now it's our job to continue to develop him, right? If you don't have the tools, well, it's hard to develop. You know what I mean? He has the tools that are being developed, and he's done tremendous in 15 practices. And I expect a lot of production, a lot of great things out of him coming this season.
We've all seen Myron Tungvaloa as a 3 technique. We know what he can do. He's been playing since his freshman year back in 2017. What was the adjustment like for him? Moving from 3 technique, obviously his body looks different now, right? So you're able to kind of maybe take off some pounds that he had a hard time keeping on anyway. But he's going to look physically a little different. But how was the transition for him playing further away from the ball, playing on the edge, those kind of things from him this spring? And what role do you see him playing for your defense this year?
Yeah, I don't have a whole bunch to compare him off of, right? I wasn't here last year in those years that he played D tackle. I've watched film, but there's only so much value you put in the film versus what you see live. And what I've seen live is a dominant defensive end. In 15 practice, he's been dominant, he's been disruptive, and has done an unbelievable job. And that's my expectation for a guy that's a returning starter. And so I think he's going to have a great year. The transition's been really good. He looks good. He's been playing fast. He's been working his tail off. And it's exciting to see what he's going to do at this new position. But again, the only judgments I get to make is from the 15 practices I've seen him live, and that's what I know him as. I know him as a defensive end, and I know him as a guy that you can move to tackle. You can move him inside, outside, do some different things. So teams don't always know where he's going to be, but he's been disruptive and dominant.
We'll wrap up here, Coach, with we've talked a lot about the defensive line, linebackers. We've in our shows in the past, we've talked a lot about the corners. Kyle Hamilton certainly gets a lot of attention, All-American safety, tremendous talent. I know you haven't coached him yet, so we won't necessarily get to that yet. But there's a player I did want to ask you about. And one of the first marks that you made when you got to Notre Dame was your first recruiting win as a player you can talk about, and that's Houston Griffith. So what have you seen? Obviously, you're involved in getting him because you build up the depth chart and all that. But what have you seen from Houston since you actually started working with him from a football standpoint? And what kind of role, what kind of expectations do you have for him in this defense this season?
Yeah, I mean, Houston's a guy that you respect because the minute he made the decision to come back, he's been 100 miles an hour. right? He's been 100 miles an hour finding ways to improve. He always wants to watch film. He always wants to meet with Coach O'Leary. Always wants to say, Coach, tell me how I get better. And that's, to me, what you want, right? You want guys that seek feedback. They seek improvement. And that's what I've seen out of Houston. And if you continue to have that mentality, you're only going to continue to improve. He had a great spring, right? I think you see him in positions that he can accomplish what he's being asked to do. And so I expect him to be a huge part of our success that we have on defense. He's going to play a tremendous amount, and it's going to be really exciting as we go into fall camp. Now you have Kyle back, you have Houston and DJ and KJ and Litchfield. You got all these guys that, hey, now we get to continue to see more depth, but also you got a little bit of that competition where you're going to see who rises when the competitiveness comes out.
Speaking of that position, and this is more big picture, not specifically Houston or anybody else, because as you said, there's going to be a competition. But I would imagine most offensive coordinators are going to say, hey, that number 14 kid's pretty good. We may not want to throw at him 20 times a game, so let's take our chance with the other guys. Is that something that's expressed to them? Do they already know it? And how important is it for that second safety position to be effective? Because as you look at the different saying, well, we don't want to throw at that guy. Well, then what's your other options? To throw at that guy. So how important is that position and those guys knowing, hey, look, people are going to come after you. You got to be ready. You have to execute at a high level.
Yeah, that's the reality of it. Kyle Hamilton has built a reputation of a guy you probably don't want to attack too much. And so because of that, the other safety better be ready to roll. And if you're an extreme competitor, like I know these guys are, that's what you want. Like, challenge me. Come on. Come after my side because I'm going to make you pay. And I think those guys have embraced that challenge. And it's in a great group. Coach O'Leary's done a great job with that room and developing the confidence, developing the depth, and obviously developing the production from spring when Kyle's not there. And so I'm excited to see what is going to happen as we go into the fall and see a new Kyle Hamilton's out there and see, hey, you got some competition for the other spot, but there's also going to be competition to be, the 1B at each position. We can't play 11 guys. We can't only play 11 guys, and that's not a philosophy of mine. We're going to try to play our top 22 guys, and we have a philosophy of having 1As and 1Bs because of the expectations as you play at such a high level. Your effort is so high that you're not going to be able to play 60, 70, 80 plays, And the other thing is we got some really good players. You know what, Kyle Hamilton, you got to be down this series. Take a breather this series. We're going to get the next best guy in, okay? And he's going to go in there, and the expectations or the execution isn't going to lower. And so that's a way for me to get these guys to understand that there's not just 11 guys that are going to be the reason we have success on this defense. It's going to be a top 22, if not 24 guys, man, that make sure that we're rolling guys. We're all playing at a high level, and it's going to be definitely a total unit feel.
Last question about the safeties, Coach, and you can disagree with this, and you can explain to me how I'm wrong. So this is not you have to accept my premise, okay? So I feel like the advent of RPOs and spreading field teams out that we've seen, especially really come on the last 3-4 years. I mean, they've been around for a while, but it's really become a prominent. I feel like it stresses safeties more than any other position on defense. You look at that in your position, how important is it for you that you have safeties that can play in space, can cover, and can play the run? And how important, like, what does it do for your defense if you have guys that can do all those things at a high level?
That's what you have to be able to do at the safety position now. You hit the nail on the head, in that corner's got to be able to cover. Yeah, you got to tackle a little bit, but you got to be able to cover. D-lineman got to be able to stop the run and go after the passer. That safety, and especially what we do, has to be able to play man coverage, has to be able to play the middle of the field, has to be able to play some type of two-high coverage, has to be able to fit in the box and be able to make tackles versus teams that play 11, 12 personnel, right? And so it's not easy to find that because sometimes they have a strength at one, and all of a sudden you go ask them to play man coverage, and they can't play man coverage. Okay, then all of a sudden maybe, hey, he's a great cover guy, but does he really fit in the box and be able to trigger in close space when you need him to? And so it's really, really difficult to find a guy that's uniquely talented at all those different traits. Fortunately, I think they've done a great job here in recruiting, and these guys have the ability to do those things that we're going to ask them to do. And guess what? If they can't do the things we ask them to do, well, then us as coaches have to change what we're asking them to do. And that's where we're not so bullheaded and saying, if you can't do this, then what do we do? Well, what are you going to do? You can't just blame it on the players, right? And that you got to be able to, as a coach, be able to find a way to put these unbelievable, talented individuals in a position to have success. And that's going to be our challenge, and that will continue to be our challenge.
Well, that's a great way to end it, Coach. And I appreciate you joining the Irish Breakdown podcast today. That's going to do it for this interview with Coach Freeman. Make sure that you check it out. Give us a like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. If you're listening via podcast, give us a 5-star review. And as always, check out irishbreakdown.com. Coach Freeman, thank you so much for joining us, and enjoy these last few days before things get really crazy here when players come back and report and get ready for camp.
No doubt. The time's coming, man. Thanks, Brian. It was fun.
Thanks, Coach. So there you go.
Marcus Freeman. That was one heck of an interview, Brian. Thanks for bringing that to us. I'm glad that he was able to take the time out and join the Irish Breakdown podcast, because there was some pretty great stuff that he said there. I'm gonna tee it up for you first. What were some of the things that stood out to you?
Well, we kind of go into these things, Vince, and it's like here's what I hope happens, right? Here's what I hope this defense is going to look like. Here's what I hope he believes in. Here's what I hope he's going to emphasize and things like that. And it's kind of like, okay, check. He checked all those boxes. And, the thing you guys all know, anyone that's familiar with my work at all knows that I'm very much it's good to be a smart coach, and he is a smart coach, but you have to have a coach that understands the importance of it's about the players at the end of the day. It's about the players. And so when you look at this defense and you say he understands the strengths of this team, I think he understands the limitations of this team, and he understands how to build it the way that it needs to be built. And to me, that was a big part of it. I think he checked a lot of the boxes. We've talked about, I use the expression about blitzing when you want to, not because you have to. That was me bringing that up after he had kind of already talked about that, right, and the importance of that. And, those are things that you all like. He's not shy at all at saying, hey, here's what this defense is going to be like, which means, yes, the guys that we have now, we may tailor, but this is what we're recruiting to. And then it kind of answers some of the questions as why they're recruiting the guys that they're recruiting. Long, athletic guys that can really run and cover. Well, that's what you want to be. You want to be aggressive with your coverages. And then, of course, when you just kind of look at it and say, you try to read people, right? And sure. I don't know Marcus Freeman all that well yet, but I'm working on it. But when you see him and you say, okay, when he starts talking about certain guys, you can see where he's just kind of, okay, let me give an answer where I'm being complimentary and things like that. And then you see him start kind of getting a little bit fired up about talking about Jason Adamiola and Myron Tungavaloa and Isaiah Foskey. And he starts talking about how good the defensive line is and how deep the defensive line is. And I've heard some things privately from sources about his thoughts on the defensive line. And then to see him talk about it and get fired up about it, you're like, okay, yep, that adds validity to the things that I'm hearing.
Right.
And the understanding that, look, what a defensive coordinator, and you could see him talking about it. If I have a D-line that can rush the quarterback, it gives me so much freedom as a defensive coordinator to do all types of different things. And he sees that and he believes that. And, to me, that part fired me up. But again, Vince, there's a conviction of who he wants to be, and you can see it throughout the entire interview. This is what is going to go into being a great defense.
Right.
And he believes it to his core. Exactly. And he's going to build it. And there were a lot of things he talked about. You could just kind of see where there's a lot of faith there in the coaches around him too.
Right.
And that's important. And it's very important. That's why I asked him the question about, look, you're playing a different kind of schedule than you're used to. 1 week you're playing a Pac-12 team. The nenext week you're playing the Navy. Next week you're playing a Big Ten team. The next week you're playing an ACC team. And you're still trying to learn your team.
Exactly.
What's the role that your assistants have? And I think that's where having a guy like Mike Mickens is so important, because Mike Mickens has coached these DBs for a year.
Right.
And so not only did Marcus Freeman and Mike Mickens coach together for a couple years in Cincinnati, they played high school football together. Like, their families have known each other for like a couple decades, right? I mean, so
Right.
there's a level of trust there. And from what I understand, there's been a really strong connection already from this is, talking to a couple sources, there's been a really strong connection already between him and Mike Elston.
Right.
And you just see it, that there's some confidence there in those coaches that is then going to allow him to say, okay, I don't need to necessarily make all these decisions about every single individual player. I trust that Mike's going to get these guys ready. And when he tells me who's ready to play, I'm going to know it. Same thing with, I should say which Mike Mickens. And then same thing with Mike Elston. And I think that's an important thing too, because sometimes you can walk into a situation as a first-year coordinator and you have sort of inherited a staff and there's not a lot of faith there.
Right.
That's not the case with Marcus Freeman and the defensive staff at Notre Dame.
We got a super chat before I kind of give my opinion here real quick. John Klimek says, he goes, that's a coach. Because I like how he approaches the answers and explains why that's the answer. Wasn't afraid to say that he's going to give Kyle Hamilton a break. The base D explanation was amazing as well. There was no pulling any punches, as you said before, going into the interview. He answered all of your questions, and I think he answered them with depth. It wasn't a bunch of coach speak.
Yeah, it wasn't fluff.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, he's not giving away scheme. Hey, here's what we like to do on 3rd and 5.
Right.
Here's how we're going to defend USC. It wasn't that kind of thing, and I wasn't going to answer him that because I would never give that answer as a coach.
Exactly.
But it was still the reason I wanted to stick philosophically to this conversation, Vince, and not try to pry for more particulars is because I wanted people to get an idea of what makes Marcus Freeman tick philosophically. Right. That you're willing to share, and he did a great job. I'm not surprised he did a great job. It's his defense, but more of the standpoint of how open he was. And I felt the same thing about Tommy Rees. I was very pleased to just see how open both of them were about explaining what they believe in. And the ease in which they kind of share their core convictions, because you have to have those.
Yes.
Right? Yes, you need to be open-minded and willing to adjust and change, but you have to have core convictions. And we saw those from Marcus Freeman today. I mean, his core convictions are what? Aggressive, right? Players playing fast. It's about them, not me, right? Mm-hmm. It's about it's about building around those.
It was the personnel. It was the personnel part of it.
It's personnel around a philosophy.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. There's still a philosophy that he's recruiting to. Right. And that's the combination of things you see. It's not just about having 11 talented players and say, okay, guys, see ball, go get ball. Right. You still got to put them in the right position. And how do you do that? Those are things to see. And I always get nervous about defensive coordinators who, like, this was my issue with Don Brown when he got hired at Michigan. A friend of mine said, man, Notre Dame should have made a run at Don Brown. And I said, no. That works at BC, but that wouldn't work at Notre Dame.
Sure.
And we kind of saw that the last couple of years at Michigan. When a coach wants to do all this exotic stuff, it's about him and showing how smart he is. Whereas with Marcus Freeman, he understands, yes, I need to be smart. I need to game plan. I need to have calls. I need to get guys lined up correctly. I need to be able to do this, 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 and this, and this. But at the end of the day, it's about my guys. And if I got guys can whip your guys' butt, then I don't need to go prove to everyone how smart I am.
Right.
And he even said that. He's like, oh, what a great call. And he's like, that ain't a great call. My guy just whipped your guy's butt. I mean, right. You love hearing that because he understands, like, look, if I don't have to come up with these really exotic pressures and I can just say my dudes are better than your dudes, then you're going to be really good on defense. That is music to my ears.
Yes.
At that point in time, Vince, music to my ears.
Well, and I love the fact that when I referred to the personnel part, he's taking the personnel side of it, right? And he's saying, okay, this is what this kid does well within my philosophy. So I can, I can use that, but then I can find another piece of another guy. It's personnel driven, but inside of his philosophy, which I think is important because I think a lot of coaches, when you hear that it's all about the personnel, they completely change up their defense to, make up for the guys that they have running it. Right. And to a degree that's smart, but then to another degree, you've got to keep the same philosophy around that. And then you find the guys that you can plug in and the ways that they can plug in and that they can help. And I think that's really, really important. I think he gets it. I think he understands it. Now, of course, we all want to see it. Don't get me wrong. But I've heard him speak a lot now over the past couple of weeks. And I get more excited and I feel like he is going to take what Notre Dame has, because they have skill, they have talent at all three levels, right? And it's going to shine through under his philosophy. And that I don't know about you, but that gets me excited.
Well, I think the good thing is look, he's walking into a good situation too, and I think he understands that.
Right.
And that's the thing is, he's not walking into a situation where he is a first-year coach replacing a guy that got fired. And you have to reinvent the wheel and fix all these things that were broken.
Right.
He understands, okay, this was already pretty good. Let's keep that rolling. And but then also we have to also adapt to he can't run Clark Lee's defense. He's got to run his defense.
Sure, absolutely.
But you're inheriting an athletic group of linebackers. You're inheriting a really good defensive line, and it's kind of joking that you're hearing him talk about how good the defensive line is. I'm like, yeah, if you were here 4 years ago, you wouldn't have thought that.
you know what I mean? Also wouldn't have thought that you could recruit apparently a good defensive line either. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like that was,
right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was encouraging to see those things, Vince, and hear those things. And just, again, it's a guy that's convicted in who he is, but also a guy that understands, like, I got pretty good football players.
Right.
And, yeah, it's it was impressive to see. But it was also, I think he's got a good grasp of who he has now, which I was afraid that you'd kind of – I was afraid that we might not really get a sense of that until we get into the season.
Sure.
But you can tell he's kind of, okay, this is what Mickens says we have. This is what Elson says we have. But this is also what I've seen.
Right.
And I think those things are good. And
tough,
there's a lot of confidence in that group.
It's tough, though, just to kind of echo what you're saying there. It's tough because you get 15 practices in the spring and, there were guys that weren't available, and there were this and there were that, and not every practice is full go, and you're doing drill work, and then you've got summer where the coaches are around, but they're not really around, and they're not really working with these guys one-on-one. It's tough to figure out what you have. I mean, you can see a guy who maybe jumps off the page at you in one practice, and then another practice he may not do that at all. You know what I mean? You have to play the long game when you're a coach, right? That, like, as a baseball coach, I see a kid, man, he gets up for BP and he's crushing the ball, and he's got such great footwork in the field and all this other stuff. And then I'm all excited about him, and then next practice he looks like a JV player. And it's like, okay, got to play the long game here. What does this kid look like over a long period of time? Marcus Freeman hasn't had that long period of time, right? Yeah. And so to see his conviction right now on a lot of these guys is impressive.
And there's a couple guys he hasn't seen yet. He hasn't seen Kyle Hamilton yet. He hasn't seen Jake Lacey yet.
Good point.
So, the coverage thing to me stood out a lot because he did not back down from wanting to have aggressive coverage. I actually anticipated him doing so. I thought he would be more like, well, look, that's what and I tried to set him up for it in case he wanted to say it, right?
Sure.
Look, was that more of what you did at Cincinnati because of who you had, or, is it going to be different? He's like, no, we want to be aggressive in coverage. I mean, that's who we want to be. Where,
right.
Maybe they don't have the personnel to do that this year. I mean, there's still a lot of question marks at corner. There's still some question marks at the other safety position. But he didn't back down. So he's not lowering the bar because of what he inherits. He's saying, look, this is where we want to be, and we've got to do what we need to do to get there. So to me, that part was
we
awesome.
Got another super chat, Brian. Old Grim wants to know if it's Kelly's turn to be on your podcast.
That I can guarantee you is never going to happen.
I would agree with that as well. We're batting 1,000 right now. There's no sense in swinging for the fences because
Well, I'm going to swing for the fences, but I'm just telling you that's not going to happen.
That's good stuff, though. That is good stuff. So, Brian, do you want to jump into our Q&A at this point, or do you have a couple more points that you want to make about?
I think as we wrap up the evaluation of this interview with Coach Freeman, I think a lot of it is he can speak for himself, and that's the thing is there were so many good nuggets in there. I would encourage people to listen to it again, just because I tried to kind of tie it all together, into like one philosophical conversation about who he is. But I hope people got the conviction that he clearly has, and in what he wants to do, and then also that he's going to hold that standard. I mean, there was an opportunity for him to hem and haw about if he didn't believe in the personnel. There was a lot of opportunities for him to get to say, hey, look, we may not do this, may not do that, but he didn't back down from any of that.
Yeah.
You can tell that he has a lot of confidence in himself, which any good coach has to have.
Mm-hmm.
He also has a lot of confidence in the coaches around him, which you have to have. Even when he's talking about Chris O'Leary, I mean, you could just see that he has just how he talked about Chris O'Leary. And then you can tell there's a great confidence in the situation he walked into from a talent standpoint. But also embraces the challenges of what it's like being at Notre Dame. You know, he talked about how smart the kids are, and this, you know, Notre Dame kids are smart and they can do this and they can do that. But then he also talked about the uniqueness of the schedule, which I think he understands. I was curious to see how he was going to answer that one, because that could have just been like, hey, we're going to do what we're going to do. Well, it doesn't really work at Notre Dame because the variety of the schedule that you play. He didn't do that. He you could tell he understands, like, yeah, we're because he was like, and then we play Wisconsin, you know, and it's just kind of like he gets it, right? He gets the challenge of coaching at Notre Dame, where number one, and here's the, like, so in the American Athletic Conference where he was, not every team runs the same offense. There's a lot of similarities, but the difference is you're going to play at least is that a 14-team league? Correct? It's a 14-team league, right?
Yeah, it's a big one.
So you're going to play 7 teams every year.
Right.
Every year. So even though they're different, you have the book on them, so to speak.
Yeah.
Whereas at Notre Dame, you're going to play 2 teams every year.
And by having the book on them,
3.
It's important to understand what that means. So they could tweak their philosophy from year to year. Of course.
But you know what the philosophy is. You know the personnel,
and that's the big one. You know the personnel. You've seen these guys come up, you know, and become more prominent players and things like that. Like it's the same in high school. When you play your conference teams, you know what you're going to get. Like there's really no surprises per se. And I think that's an important aspect to understand, because you don't get that when you're independent, right? Who are you going to play every year? You're going to play Navy. You're going to play USC. Stanford right now. Those are the 3 that you're going to play every year. Other than that, it's kind of a grab bag. You might have a back-to-back, things like that, but it's not always like that.
Yeah, and that's like, again, Notre Dame is going to play 3 teams every year. That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
That you can get. Now, there's going to be years where you play a certain team in back-to-back years, but you're not going to play anybody 3, 4, 5 years in a row, other than USC, Navy, and Stanford. And Stanford comes off the schedule in a couple of years.
Right, and I would be completely upset if that was the case.
No, I would.
You know what I mean?
But that is a challenge for and I think more so for a defensive coordinator than an offensive coordinator.
Yeah,
because offensively you're dictating more than you are on defense.
Right.
And so, but to see him, okay, he gets that. He gets that. I mean, again, being independent is a whole lot different than being in the league, and this is his first soiree into being independent.
Sure. Yeah.
So you can tell he gets it, and that was an encouraging thing too. But I mean, again, just a really sharp guy, which we already knew, very convicted in what he believes in, and a guy that's very confident in the people that are around him. And that to me is a key ingredient to this whole thing. Is you got to trust the people. If you want them to trust you, you got to trust them, and you can see that there's a great deal of. I mean, he would bring up, you know, Mike Elson's doing this with Foskey. You know, I didn't ask him about it. He just brought it up. And so you see it with talking about Chris O'Leary. He starts bringing up, you know, Chris O'Leary and Houston Griffith. Starts bringing up Mike Mickens. Even though, I mean, even in times when I didn't ask him about it, that was very encouraging to see.
So we want to thank Coach Freeman for taking the time to join us on the Irish Breakdown podcast. We also want to thank Katie Lonergan, sports information over at Notre Dame, for setting up that interview. She's awesome. She's been great with everything we've asked so far.
I feel bad for Katie because, like, she walked into this job and she was, and like a month into this job, was like, okay, COVID.
Yeah,
I know, right? She's had a tough job, but she does it very well. And
yes,
and I'm not just saying that because she hooked us up with these 2 interviews.
No, it's true though.
Job.
Yeah, we quick responses, all of that stuff. So
and she's a dog person too, you know. So I mean, you can't go wrong there.
There you go. So again, that was our Marcus Freeman interview. So make sure you check that out again. We'll have this, obviously, this podcast up, but then we'll also have the shortened version, which is just the interview without our analysis. So make sure you check that out as well. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you share with your friends. Make sure you subscribe. You hit the like button. Hit that notification bell. We love having you on.
If you're
there.
new to the channel, we also did last week a one-on-one with Tommy Reese, the offensive coordinator at Notre Dame. So if you didn't see that, go back and find that too. It's easy to find.
Yep. And if you're listening on a podcast, make sure you subscribe and share with your friends and family. So that's going to do it for this edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you stay tuned because we'll be right back with question and answers. All right, Brian.
Not a lot of questions, a lot of comments.
A lot of comments. A lot of great
comments.
A lot of great comments. I was kind of trying to go through and find some actual questions or some comments that we could comment on, I guess. But obviously, there's a lot of excitement there for Marcus Freeman, et cetera. Did you get that list that I sent you, Brian?
I did, but some of those are already gone.
Okay, that's
by
fine.
the time we get there. So,
all right, cool.
There's so much commenting going on that the first comment I have is at the 1:30 mark. So whatever was said the first 20 minutes, if we don't get to it, if you had a comment or a question,
put it at the bottom.
Just give it to us again. We apologize for that, but give it to us again. And I kind of like there was a lot of this, right? Tyler Robinson says this. Says, Marcus, I'm 40 years old. I have diabetes and asthma, but I have 4 years of eligibility left. Why haven't you recruited me? I'm a Notre Dame guy. And there's a lot of that.
Yes.
You know, like I'm ready to play for this guy. And and I think I think a lot of that was, number one, he's very intelligent, but number two, he speaks in a way that it's like he's making you feel better about you.
Yeah.
And that's so amazing. Important for a coach.
And that's like something you're kind of born with, man.
This guy believes in me, right? Yeah, like, this guy really believes in me.
Right. That's not something you can teach.
Yeah. And then Sean Rogers, I appreciate this comment. Coach Freeman, oh man, Brian just took the best live podcast to a whole new level. Boom. Kenny Moore says we got to get Coach Freeman a Gap Closers t-shirt. Yes.
Yes, we do.
Doubt.
Yes, we do.
No doubt. Brent Byers' response to that is great. Freeman needs no shirt. He is the Gap Closer.
He's just the human version of the Gap Closer.
Here's another great one, Vince. I'm 58, 5'11", and 288, ready to run out of the tunnel, go Irish. I mean, there's a lot of that, a lot of those comments where it's just like you can just see people are excited to hear from them. And it's like, if that's how we are, imagine what the players are like.
No, absolutely. I mean, no question.
Because he's the one who is going to be determining, he's going to play a big role in their future success. Jonathan Hilkema says, man, these answers are amazing. Can't wait to hear some halftime speeches from Freeman. I think mostly we're going to be hearing the Brian Kelly halftime
I was going to say,
speeches. But Vince, we got a super chat down there if you want to pull that up while I'm finding some more questions and comments.
Absolutely. I will absolutely grab that. It's from John A1. He says, thanks for another great show, IB. No, thank you.
Thank you, John,
for the support. We really appreciate it. And believe me, I was sitting there watching that interview,
so you actually literally were. Because like when we're out, when we had the video playing, the way that StreamYard is, we still can see like our little selves down below. And there was a lot of times where Vince was like literally like this, just listening, just like
I'm telling you,
like taking notes.
I'm right with you guys, man. I'm telling you, I get fired up listening to good coaches talk as well. Mm-hmm. And I would say Marcus Freeman definitely fits that bill. So very excited about that interview. I was, when Brian called me and he's like, hey, man, I'm going to be interviewing Marcus Freeman today. I'm like, yeah, what?
Hey, sorry, we can't do the Purdue-Toledo thing.
Yeah. I was heartbroken about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Pierre says, hey, I'm ready to read my acceptance letter by the lake. It's a Rudy.
Nice Rudy reference.
Yes.
Love that. But let me tell you how disappointed I was when I realized that the bench that he sat on, overlooking the Golden Dome, wasn't really like the campus. It was across the street from the campus. Mm-hmm. I searched everywhere for that bench. When I finally figured it out, I was like, oh, I've been duped my whole life. Yeah. It's not okay. Then I sat down and I felt like I was Rudy, so it's all good.
And we're seeing a lot of these kind of comments. Kenny Moore, Notre Dame needs to do whatever it takes to make sure Freeman never leaves South Bend. I
at this point, I'm with you. Yeah. Still a lot to be determined, obviously, but it's hard to not get excited. I will say that. Yeah.
Corey D. I agree, Kenny. This guy gets it. He's a superstar that understands Notre Dame. I mean, there's a lot of that. Kind of going around.
Right.
Pierre has a great comment. I thought this, to me, if there was one comment that sort of summarizes what I liked about this interview, it's this one.
Yes.
That is refreshing versus forcing your sophisticated scheme down some kid's throat.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree.
It's Thomas Walsh, these kids do well.
And again, we're reading comments because there weren't a lot of questions so far.
Right.
a lot of comments, and Thomas Walsh says this guy just makes it impossible not to get fired up. These kids are going to love playing for him. And that's what I've heard. I've heard comments from kids that don't play his position. I've talked to people that know these kids, and they'll say, look, he grabbed him my kid after practice and said, hey, you're doing a great job. We're expecting a lot out of you this year. Just he does a lot of those things, but he's also demanding. Yeah. It's not like he's just like, guy makes a mistake, he goes up, it's okay, I still love you. It's not that kind of thing. But it's knowing when to tear a kid down and when to build a kid back up. And
there's such a thing as tough love too. That's okay.
It's just holding a high. It's setting a high standard, holding people accountable for it. But that's the tearing down part. It's the correction, and then there's the building up part. And to me, the great coaches understand the need for both. And Absolutely. There's been some other, to me, really good coaches at Notre Dame that never quite reached their full potential because I don't think they understood the second part enough. They got the tearing down part right.
Sure.
They don't understand the building. And again, it's not a touchy-feely, huggy thing. It's like, hey, man, here's why I'm on you. Because I believe in you. The great utmost, I'm going to stay on you because I think you can be great.
Right.
It's not a kumbaya moment, right? The standard's going to be very high. But as we saw with Harry Heastan, if you think that your coach believes in you, you don't care if he yells and cusses at you. Mm-hmm. As long as he's coaching me up and teaching me, and I know that he believes in me. And I'm not saying Marcus Freeman yells and cusses at kids like Harry Heastan. I'm making the point. That's an extreme, right?
Right.
That you can get on me. Most kids want to be coached hard.
Yes.
As long as they think you care about them and you have their back.
Yes.
And I think that's something that Marcus Freeman, we're seeing it in these interviews, but I've also heard it about, from people inside the program that it's also the way he is with the players too. And it's exciting. It's very exciting. So let me see if we can find some more questions. Like I said, we got
lots of great
discussion.
Comments. Lots of discussion as well. I'm at about 145 now.
Okay.
Just so you are aware, sir.
Mm-hmm.
There was a good one in there. I want to say, I can't remember who said it, but somebody said that I think it might have been Sean saying, I think we can shut out our first three opponents.
That's going to be
thoughts
tough
on that.
Shutouts don't happen a whole lot. I'm not worried about shutting them. Look, there's some good offenses there, right? Florida State's going to have a good offense. They're going to score points. Toledo's got one of the better running backs Notre Dame is going to face this year. They're going to score. I don't think they're going to shut people out. You look at Purdue. That's one of the best offensive minds that Notre Dame is going to face this year. Oh, and they also happen to have arguably the best receiver that Notre Dame is going to face all year, and a lot of guys coming back. So I don't expect a lot of shutouts. I don't. They may have one or two shutouts this year, but look, shutouts are kind of a rare thing. I'm looking at as good as Notre Dame was the last few years. They shut out South Florida, who was pretty flipping terrible. And they shut out Bowling Green the year before. It was pretty terrible. In 2018, when Notre Dame went undefeated, had 0 shutouts.
Right.
Matter of fact, that year they only had held one team under 10 points. So, you look at the 2012 season when Notre Dame had an elite defense, finished second nationally in scoring defense. They shut out one team.
Yeah.
And that was Wake Forest.
Right.
So shutouts are going to be tough. Now, if you wanted to kind of get a little bit bigger picture, say, they're going to shut teams out and, in during periods when it matters. There's been a lot of games like that.
Right.
Where a team maybe gets a second half score or a fourth quarter score, things like that. But, that would be another way to look at it.
Sure.
Yeah. So we'll kind of see. But, yeah, I'm trying to find some more questions here.
There was another question in there that I wanted to get your opinion on, and I'm pretty sure I know where this is, but it's like I want to bring it up just so you can put it to bed, I guess, for a lot of the comments that we get, about Marcus Freeman and being a great recruiter and having him recruit offensive players, right, as the defensive coordinator. Somebody said they need to put him on Dante Moore, right now, blah, blah, blah. I wanted to get your –
Dante Moore's not coming to Notre Dame because of Marcus Freeman. Right. Carnell Tate's not coming to Notre Dame because of Marcus Freeman. Just like Anthony Lucas wouldn't become Notre Dame if Marcus Freeman was the offensive coordinator, right, because of him. That's going to be up to Tommy Rees and the assistant coaches on offense and the head coach and Brian Kelly. And look, yes, I'm frustrated by some of the things that are going on offense, but right now, we put some intel on the Irish Breakdown message board. I would encourage you all to look at it. If you've signed up for the message board and you're not on there regularly, do so, because I put some intel last night on Tobias Merriweather, and there was some CJ Williams intel about Tobias Merriweather. There's still a chance the staff's going to finish off pretty well, so it's not like these are bums, right?
Right. Had that conversation with people yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah. At the end of the day, if Marcus Freeman did recruit Dante Moore, okay, fine. They have a great relationship. But if Coach Reese doesn't put a great product on the field this year, which you and I are expecting he's going to do, then it won't matter. Right. I mean, so I get it. Marcus Freeman's a rock star. I get it. He's done a great job. I get it. I'm not taking anything away from him, but it's the same thing on defense. They don't have the 4-man corner class they have now, which I know people at Notre Dame are fired up about. If it wasn't for Marcus Freeman and Mike Mickens.
Right.
And they wouldn't have the D-line class that they have right now if it wasn't for Marcus Freeman and Mike Elston. That's important. And so he is a really important piece of, it's like Kelly and then the coordinators, and then the assistants. I mean, that's just how it goes, right?
Sure.
But they've got to all be working together as one. And I understand where people are coming from. I think some of that's tongue-in-cheek, but I do know for a fact that some people actually believe that.
Oh,
absolutely. It wouldn't matter. Yes. And number one, you're now taking away from his ability to focus on his side of the ball too.
Right.
So, Marcus Freeman is going to do his part. But, look, Brian Kelly's doing his part right now. Tommy Reese is working his tail off on recruiting right now. And, at least one of the coaches that I've been hard on all summer in the last couple months has stepped it up. That's Coach Alexander. That's good.
Yeah.
Now he's just got to maintain it. Because what you and I have been saying for months as we hammer Coach Alexander is part of the reason we're hard on him is because we know he's capable of better. We've seen him coach better than he has at Notre Dame. We've seen it. We saw it at Arizona State. We saw it at Wisconsin. Right? We think he's capable of better. And that's why I didn't say fire Dell. It's, hey, do what I know you're capable of doing, and he's doing that. It's why I was so hard on Coach Kelly for all those years about not being more involved in recruiting, because I felt if he did it, he'd be really good at it.
Right.
And we're seeing that. So I understand it, but I think that also speaks volumes about the impact and the excitement that Marcus Freeman is creating, which is important. And if fans aren't the only ones feeling that buzz, which is why Notre Dame has recruited so well on defense, because you can just see it, right? I mean, you can feel the energy when you're I'm sitting in my house talking to him. He's sitting in his office where he's on a laptop. I'm on a computer. We're talking, and people are listening from thousands of miles away are like fired up.
Right, exactly.
Right? How do you think it is when you're a 17-year-old kid talking to him, right?
In your living room.
Right. Or on the phone or on an unofficial visit, whatever. It's like, ooh, I want to play for that guy.
Yeah, exactly.
And, and that's a big part of the success he's going to have. And now you start giving him better and better players. There's just a level of excitement now. But again, at the end of the day, he hasn't coached any games at Notre Dame yet. So we need to see him now carry that out. But I have a great deal of excitement, but also I have no doubt because, the one thing I didn't doubt about him, there's always the question of, okay, recruiting at Cincinnati ain't like recruiting at Notre Dame.
Right.
How will he transition to that? It was a bit of an unknown. The one thing I wasn't worried about was he going to do a good job coaching? That was not the concern. The dude took a bunch of kids that are Cincinnati caliber players, and they almost beat Georgia. I mean, defense ain't the reason they lost that game to Georgia, right? You had a top 10 defense while playing in a league known for scoring. You're doing all right. That part I wasn't concerned about. It was the recruiting part. Well, he's aced that test so far. Now we get to the part, starting next week, the part that I was most confident in. And I think that's where my excitement comes from when I'm looking for what Marcus Freeman can do at Notre Dame.
We got a super chat, Brian. I want to bring it up. Victor Cummings, my guy Vic, he says, "Hey Vince, Freeman is amazing, and we have amazing talent on every level. So what's going to keep this defense from reaching that potential, Coach Vic?" And it's Coach Vic because he and I coach together. So definitely know Coach Vic. So welcome, my friend. I appreciate you coming on and appreciate the super chat. As far as the answer to the question, Brian, of course, I'm going to give you an opportunity for this one as well. But for me, what's going to keep this defense from reaching its potential? There's a possibility for a learning curve. I mean, this is a brand new defense. It's a brand new philosophy. Some guys are going to be playing some positions that they haven't played before. So there is the possibility for a bit of a learning curve there. And then, of course, the easy answer is injuries. I mean, if there are injuries to key guys, then that is going to hinder this defense. But I do believe that they're headed in the right direction. And I think the potential of this defense could be, I don't want to be too optimistic here, but I really do feel like it could be a top 10 for sure, potential top 5 defense. I really do feel that way. And it's going to be tough to derail that. But again, injuries and then a bit of a learning curve. That's my answer to that one.
I would add that I think that there's amazing talent on all 3 levels, but I don't think there's amazing talent at every position on all 3 levels.
Fair enough.
That would be it. Like, yes, there is an amazing talent. I mean, your best defensive player arguably is your safety, right? And I say arguably just because if somebody wants to have an argument that somebody's going to be better, that's fine. But
sure,
I mean, I'm not engaging in that argument. Kyle Hamilton is the best defensive player.
Why not?
But I still think there's enough questions in the secondary. Even if Cam Hart's legit, okay, Clarence Lewis is a good player, but is he a player that you can beat Bama with?
Sure.
That's still a question mark.
Yeah.
Houston Griffith, you can beat a lot of teams with, but is he good enough for you to beat Ohio State with? I think those are still question marks. Mm-hmm. The linebackers have to produce a lot more. There's a lot of question marks there. What's Jack Kaiser going to do at Rover? Is Drew White going to be better this year than he was last year? Is Bo Bauer going to be better this year than he was last year? Are the Wills going to be way better? They need to be way better than they were last year. Those are still question marks. And look, Isaiah Foskey has the tools to be a great player, but he still has to go prove that he can be a great player, not just look like a great player, but actually be a great player. So there's still enough question marks to where, can they reach that full potential? Sure. Will they do it? I think.
Yeah.
And am I betting? Am I putting my mortgage on the line for it? No. Because there are at least enough questions on top of what you said, Vince. Look, we still got to see how they pick up the scheme. We got to still see how he specifically game plans for certain teams and things like that. But then also, the offense has got to do its part too.
Right.
And that's a piece to it as well. If they're constantly putting the defense in bad spots, and I don't expect this to happen, but I'm just in theory, if they turn the ball over a lot, if the special teams is giving up big plays, if they're giving teams short fields, then that's another thing that's going to keep the defense from reaching its full potential. Just like it would be if the defense was a sieve and it puts the offense in a lot of bad spots where they got to score every time they get the ball, that's going to keep the offense from being as good. I mean, that offense and defense plays off each other. And so that's a factor as well. And that's more of a big picture thing, not necessarily specific to, I think this is going to happen to Notre Dame. That's just more of in theory, if this happens, it will also hurt them as well.
Exactly. Got a lot of Jack Cohn conversation going where I'm at in the conversation. Because our guy Ladarius was asking who's going to be the starter, and that started the Jack Cohn conversation.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions that Ladarius asked that I'll address some of these here in a little bit, but I want to get some of these comments about the interview first. But D-Rock, my man D-Rock, key takeaways from this interview: 1, put players in position where they can be successful. 2, aggressive play. 3, make the opponents earn everything they get. And 4, playing at a high level. I think those are good takeaways. I think he got it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Jonathan says we need a weekly show with either Reese or Freeman. And sure, I will go ahead and also play the lottery this week too. And win that. That'd be awesome, wouldn't it? But that's not.
Yeah, it would. You kidding me? Man. Why just bring them on both together? Why not?
Yeah. It's not going to happen. Pierre says, "Wow, that was awesome. You guys killed that." So referring to the interview with Coach Freeman. Let's see here. I got booted. So let me see if I can get back to where I was.
I love that. You're probably going to be in the 150.
I'm down in the 2s now.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds good.
Where are you at, Vince?
I'm at like 155. So
okay.
There's a question about your polo. Do you want me to put that one up there?
Sure.
Do you want to answer that? Ryan Michael says, Brian, the polo you're wearing is the one I was thinking about buying from the IB store. Sometimes white shirts, they could be a little see-through. Is that shirt thick enough so that it is not see-through?
I wear a white t-shirt. I always wear white t-shirts. So I probably wouldn't wear it without a t-shirt underneath. I mean, because I always wear. I have a very. How do I say this without creating jokes? My skin gets irritated from like certain fabrics, and so like this kind of polo, I would not wear without an undershirt. That's just me. So I mean, I have a white t-shirt, and you can't see it, but I honestly don't. I'm not going to test it out for you, Ryan. Sorry. I don't think it. I would wear a shirt underneath it. That's me.
I will say I wore the white one on a podcast, and of course you can only see my shoulders, but I did not have a t-shirt on underneath it, and I actually thought it was fine.
Okay, see, then Vince would have a better idea.
I'll just say that, and we'll go with that.
Yeah.
So not too bad. It's still it runs a little big. I will say that the sleeves are a little long, so keep that in mind.
So you just have short, stubby arms.
I do. I'm like a T-Rex.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, but I don't like the polos that are up here, you know?
Yeah, oh yeah. There has to be a happy medium in there someplace. Yeah. I agree.
Yep. So but no, I do think so. This shirt's a size smaller than what I normally wear, and it fits nice.
There you go.
Nice.
There you go.
So yeah, they do run a tad big, but they're very comfortable, which I'm surprised by, to be honest with you. My expectations were not high, and I was not originally going to get the white shirt, the white polo. Vince got that, and then I was like, wow, because I was afraid that the IB wouldn't stay. It would kind of get lost, but it really looks.
I love it. I love the white one. I'm a big fan of white shirts.
Yep.
Larry says it's been 1,700 days since USC beat Notre Dame,
and that's going to be over 2,000 by the time they play again after 2020, because I think Notre Dame's going to win that game. 2021, awesome. Excuse me.
That is awesome. Lots of comments, obviously, as I scroll through here. If you see something else,
yeah.
Brian,
Michael says, Brian, thank you very much for the Freeman interview. Now that's what I call chalk talk. That's what I love. Vince, you know me, man. I love talking ball, and I appreciate the fact that Coach Freeman and Coach Reese came on and talked ball. I mean, and like you said, you said something earlier too. Like they were given real answers.
Yes,
and that wasn't for me, right? That wasn't because we want to make Driscoll happy. No, that was for y'all. I mean, that's they know who the audience is. The audience isn't Brian Driscoll and Vince D'Addario.
Right.
The audience is you guys, and so I think it says a lot about that. And look, we haven't said this too, but you know what? Kudos to Coach Kelly for letting all these interviews happen.
100%.
Because he could easily say no.
It goes from him.
He has the authority to say no. So he is also saying, hey, look, let's give the fans more access to these young coordinators who are sharp guys, which is something we haven't seen a lot of.
Yeah.
And to then allow them to do it in podcast form too is really fun. Now next year I'm going to get greedy. I'm going to try to see if they can come on for a live show. So then we can
actually answer people's questions.
I'm not holding my breath, but that'd be a lot of fun. We do have another super chat. You want me to go grab it, Vince?
I do. I've got it. It's from Old Grim talking about the polo. He goes, I got that one. It's perfect. Buy one size smaller.
Yeah.
So right on the money with what we were talking about. So that's good.
Emma Leahy, Xavier Bradshaw update. Other than he told me is he plans on visiting for one of the September games. So I would expect either Toledo or Purdue is when I think we'll see him. And I'm also curious to see when, if Major Everhart sets up a visit as well. So that's going to be interesting. Let's see here. Where are you at, Vince?
I am at 213 currently. So you're probably I don't know where. I don't know. I'm guessing.
Yeah. Ladarius asked a question too. He was asking about Alabama. So asked about John Mechie. I actually remember when Notre Dame tried to recruit him out of high school. I liked him more as a safety. I mean, he's been a pretty good receiver, but I liked him more as a safety. I think he's kind of like a little bit of a bowling ball as a receiver. He's a strong, fast, physical kid that when he gets the ball, he's kind of more like a running back than a receiver.
Right.
But he's going to have to step up this year because they lost two really, really good players. I don't know if Mechie is going to be like that kind of number one guy. So they're going to need a lot of guys to step up to be more of I think Alabama is very much in a similar situation to Notre Dame this year at receiver, in that I don't know if there's a Devontae Smith, a Jerry Jeudy, a guy that's just going to go catch 80 balls.
Right.
It's going to be more of what makes them good is just that they've got so many different players. They got Jamison Williams, who transferred in from Ohio State. Slade Bolden's back, who's a Chris Fink type of guy for them. they have a great freshman class at receiver. And Saban's already proven that he can get freshman receivers on the field. So
right.
I don't know if they're going to have a guy. And then, of course, they have Jaleel Billingsley at tight end, which will help. He's a good, pretty good player. He's kind of like a big receiver anyway. He's more Tommy Tremble than he is Michael Mayer. You know what I mean?
Right.
So they'll have a lot of weapons for Bryce Young, but I don't know if there's going to be that dude, that number one guy. And then I asked, how's that going to impact the freshman? Who's going to step up and make him comfortable on 3rd and 5 to, hey, I got to go to get to this guy? Is that going to be Mechie? I think that's where he could have that big impact, even if he's not a 90-catch guy. Yeah, right. But when you need a play, you go to John, right? Or Jaleel. I think that's going to be the key thing for Bama this year. So
Jack Sullivan has a good one here. Quote, we can't just blame it on the players. We have to do what we can as coaches to let these extremely talented players be in positions of success, unquote. That is so refreshing to hear.
100%.
Could not agree with you more.
Yeah.
Too many times.
I'll say this. The last 2 coordinators were the same way.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? Clark Lee and Mike Elko were the same way. Even if they thought that the players were responsible, they never said it. They would own it. Hey, that's my fault for not getting him in position. And I'm talking what I knew from having personal conversations or back channel conversations, like, yeah, that guy made the mistake.
Yeah.
But then it would be like, I got to do a better job of making sure he understands the difference between lining up here and here. And even then there was accountability for them. And that's a refreshing thing. But Marcus Freeman gets that too. And that's very, very important. And I think Jack's refreshing to hear is not just referring to Brian Van Gorder, but also referring to what we've seen on offense.
Yeah, exactly.
I would imagine if I know Jack and I can read his mind a little bit, and Jack, if I'm wrong, just correct me, but I'll bet you that was more of a comment in regards to the offense and we don't have this, we don't have that, than it was.
That's how I took it.
Brian Van Gorder. Joseph
Barrett says, Brian, how would you rank Notre Dame's most important recruits for the 22 class, assuming Mason is number 1? Does that mean is that 23 potentially?
Who's Mason? Are you thinking Anthony Lucas? Is he like getting his basketball references confused, like rewatching Mason. Like an old 90s basketball thing? You're thinking Anthony Mason? I'm not sure. Look, to me, how would I rank Notre Dame's most important recruit for the 2022 class? I mean, to me, on defense, it's Anthony Lucas, Xavier Nwakpa, Hero Kanu. That's how I would rank
the
them.
Ones left over. Or yeah. Okay.
I mean, that's the 3. And to me, you could make a case for Anthony Lucas, for Xavier Nwakpa being number 1 because of the need,
because of the positional need. Yeah.
But my opinion has changed on that ever since Darren Agu decommitted. Like I flipped that since because if Agu's still in the class, you're okay at defensive line, even if you don't get Lucas. You've got Agu, you've got Gaberi, you got Tyson Ford, you got Donovan Hinish. You're fine. But now that Agu is gone, I think that puts Lucas back up into that prime role, where it's kind of he's the number 1, or at the very least maybe it's 1A 1B with him and Xavier just because of the position need. But they're both to me top 50 players. I mean, they're both outstanding players. And then Hero Kanu is more of a raw developing player, but lots of tools and upside. And he would be more of that guy that I could see down the road being like a nose and a 3-tech, as opposed to a 3-tech that can play 5, or in Anthony Lucas's case, a 5 technique that can play 3. Defensively, my number 1 priority is Tobias Merriweather. He's my number 1 priority on offense. Yeah. And I think after him, it's you've got to get one of the 2 linemen. You've got to get Schrouth or Rice. You've got to get one of them. If you don't get both of them, that's fine. I can live with that. It's a pretty decent class already, but you got to get one of the 2. And yes, Emil Wagner's highly ranked. 247 has him as a top 80 player. I don't see it. There's a reason Ohio State's not taking him.
Right. He's not a take for them.
Can we be honest about that? There's still 2 spots they're trying to fill in the offensive line class into 2022, and he ain't going to be one of them. And that's not his choice. That's theirs. That should tell you something. That they're not as high on him as 247 Sports, for example, who has him as a top 80 player. You got to get one of Schrouth and Rice. Now, if you get one of those guys and Emil Wagner, cool, because Emil has a lot of upside, but he's got a lower floor. But he can't be
the guy next. Yeah, right. I got you.
They need one of those other 2 guys. Now, if they get Emil, I'm not going to be like, oh, it's a terrible offensive line class. Oh, it's a good offensive line class. It's just not as good as it needed to be.
Sure.
And then, if they view running back as a need, Quinshawn Junkins, I like that. I mean, Vince, we've talked about him for a while. I mean, he's a good football player. And I kind of left out CJ Williams, who's going to be committing here. And about 10 days. He's going to commit on August 8th. He's in that top group too. I mean, it's Tobias and CJ, right? And then the linemen. And then after that, my hope is that they're willing to add a fourth receiver. I don't know if they're going to have the numbers for it. I hope that they will, and I think they want to. But you've got to get Xavier Bradshaw or Major Everhart or a player like them.
Right.
That's also very important to this.
Agreed. Yep. Matt D says, Marcus Freeman missed his calling. He would have led men into combat for our U.S. military. As a veteran myself, I would be mission ready for this guy. And his dad was in the Air Force.
Yeah.
I mean, he grew up in a military family. So that doesn't surprise me in any way that would be the case.
Correct.
No way whatsoever.
You can definitely tell he was a kid that grew up in a military home.
Yes, no question.
And I mean that in a complimentary fashion. You can bring the next question up, Vince, while you don't have to pull it away as we're still talking about the other one.
All right, sorry. Zach Nichols says, when you think about where recruiting is when 22, 23, and you and the site, is your attention more focused on where the final pieces of 22 are? Or is it the barbecue 23 taking up most of your time? He's looking for a peek behind the curtain to Brian Driscoll's
more focused
life.
on 2022 because I don't think any of those 23 kids are in a position where they're going to commit in the next 2 weeks. I think the barbecue is important for 23 kids because it's positioning you for the next stretch run, right? Like you don't do a great job with Dante Moore, which they did, by the way, so that he commits next week. You have the great visit so that you can position yourself to be in great position to get him back in the fall for a game and maybe two, and then get him back in the winter to hopefully close on him whenever he's ready to commit because he's not committing soon. That's what the barbecue is for. So like Malik Muhammad, right? Really talented corner from IMG that was on campus. You're not getting him on campus for the barbecue, the grill and chill to get him to commit because you know he's not. It's to make sure that when he starts looking at fall visits, you're going to be one of the schools that gets those visits. So to me, that's more of a down the road impact.
Laying the groundwork.
With the 22 stuff, it's like, look, what you're doing now, look, right now, CJ Williams is going to commit this summer, right? In 10 days. That's big. That's far more important to me than, what a guy's going to do in a year or 2 months or 6 months. And then Tobias Merriweather, they're still trying to convince him to commit this summer, or not to commit, to make a decision this summer.
Right.
And we have some intel on that on the Irish Breakdown message board, by the way, which you can find the link to that below. So to me, that's why 22 is my focus. I mean, I'm diving into more and more 23 film. There's no question, starting to have more conversations about who they want, who they're looking for, what their numbers are. Had a conversation with somebody recently about Drake Bowen. I know he's a top priority. Sonny Styles is a top priority at linebacker. You got Drake Bowen again on campus this weekend. That's huge, right? That's now his second visit. And I'm more concerned about like the numbers. So a month and a half ago, Notre Dame was just hoping to get Dante Moore on campus. Like, we got to get Dante Moore on campus. And I have a much longer update about him and just my thoughts on quarterback recruiting and where things are with Dante Moore on the message board. But it was, man, we just hope we can get him on campus once. Well, then that visit fired Dante up to the point where he came back again in July. So you went from just hoping he'd show up once, now he's been on campus twice.
It's huge.
Which positions you for down the road. So it's important. I don't want to make it seem like these weekends and these vids aren't important. They are important, but it's important for a longer-term thing.
Right.
Where the marathon's just getting started with Dante Moore. The marathon's getting close to the finish line with CJ Williams and Tobias Merriweather. And that's why it's important, in my opinion, to focus more on those guys because those are the Tobias Merriweather, CJ Williams, Billy Shrouth, Zach Rice on offense, and then Xavier Nwankpa, Anthony Lucas, and Hero Canoe on defense. Those, 7 players? How many of those 7 players you get is going to go a long way towards determining whether Notre Dame finishes with a top 2 to 4 class or they finish with a top 8 to 10 class. That's going to be the difference. And so that's why that group is very important. And then that success is then going to lead to, in my opinion, greater success in 23.
Yep.
And so that's why the focus on 22. It's a very good question, Zach.
Michael wants to go after the inner fan in Brian Driscoll. He says, hey, Brian, how does Coach Freeman personally make you feel about the future of Notre Dame football? How does the fan in you feel right now?
Well, I don't know if I can separate that from the coach part of me because
I know, right?
Because, I mean, that's still my more dominant personality, I would believe. And the coach part of me still says, now let's go see it, right? But I mean, as a coach, I wrote an article after it was announced that Marcus Freeman, or that Clark Lee was leaving. I almost made people's heads explode with that mistake. When it was announced that Clark Lee was leaving, I wrote an article and I was like, if they're going to go outside the program, that's the hire to make. That's the hire to make. It's Marcus Freeman. So I've studied Marcus Freeman quite a bit, especially over the last year. I met Vince during that Cincinnati game against Georgia. You and I were talking back and forth about Marcus Freeman and that defense.
Yeah.
And that's when you first said to me, like, I'm sold, right? Like, I remember you sent me that text, like,
I
okay,
do.
I get it. I'm sold.
Yep.
You know, I think he's a heck of a coach. I think he can motivate. I think he's his players play disciplined. They play confident. They play fast. They play with good fundamentals. I mean, all the things you look for in a coach as far as, man, I don't want to play that defense because you have to beat them. You have to have better dudes than them. If you don't have better dudes than them, you're not going to have success. And the reason Georgia won that game is because Georgia just had a couple better players at receiver, and they were able to hit a couple big shots. That was it.
Right.
And most teams can't do that. And so I have a great deal of confidence in what Coach Freeman is going to be. The uncertainty as far as the future is because I just don't know what the future holds beyond the next 2 years as the defensive coordinator. And so that's why I'm also, because I don't know, is some program going to scoop him up? Does Notre Dame make him the coach in waiting? Does Brian Kelly step away because they won a title and he's going to do the John Elway, mic drop moment, like, okay, I just won a championship and I'm out. There's so many uncertainties about the future that I'm not really focused too much about the future.
Right.
I want to see how Marcus Freeman does against Florida State and then Wisconsin and then Cincinnati and Purdue too, because even though Notre Dame coaches Purdue or is going to beat Purdue in my opinion, because they just have way better players, I am really curious to see how Marcus Freeman handles going toe-to-toe with Jeff Brom. Jeff Brom is one of the best offensive minds in the game, and you can ask any coach in America that, and they will tell you that. Now, there's some other things he's not doing as well as far as building that program, but as far as offensive minds go, he's in the top 3. How's Marcus Freeman going to be able to match wits with him? If you can shut them down physically and schematically, that's going to tell me a lot about him. Then what do you do against USC and North Carolina? I mean, so there's so many things that I want to see how he does in those instances. Now, I'm confident he's going to do it, but I still, as a coach, I still have very much that, okay, now let me just go see it thing. And, I'm excited for it. But I just haven't thought too much about the future because I just want to enjoy however long
enjoy the
they're
now
for.
Enjoy
and I hope it is for the long term.
Sure.
I really do.
Sure.
But I've learned in this business you never get too attached to things like that.
That's fair.
That's the reality of it.
Corey D says, having recent Freeman on speaks to the growth and evolution of this show. Great job, Brian and Vince.
Appreciate that.
Appreciate
I think
that.
it also speaks to the evolution of the Notre Dame football program. I mean,
Sure.
I'm not trying to deflect the praise. I appreciate the praise, and I don't disagree. I think if we were this little tiny itty bitty show or channel that nobody cares about, then, and I'm not speaking specifically about anybody else. That wasn't a little jab at something. I'm just making, if that's who we were, they wouldn't have wasted their time. But I also think it speaks to that Brian Kelly is trying to make the program in some ways. He's trying to put a more of a face, like it's still his face on it. It's still Brian Kelly's program. Sure. But I think Brian Kelly understands that there's advantages to letting people see my young coordinators be successful.
Right.
And so I mean, a year ago this doesn't happen. We were able to get access like in the past to the one-on-ones. We could sit. I mean, I told people that 2 years ago I was able to sit in the office when I was still at BGI, and I sat in Clark Lee's office for 2 hours. We did an interview for about 30 minutes, and then we talked ball for an hour and a half. Right. So there's been that, but like this kind of access, like coming on a podcast, letting people see their personality, because your ability to read into his personality when I'm doing a written interview is based on my ability or lack of as a writer. So like when Lou Samoji would interview Brian Kelly, you could get a real good sense of what Brian Kelly's energy was because Lou was such a great writer. Right. But this way you get to actually see it and experience and start to learn them himself. And that's important. And the fact that Brian Kelly is allowing that to be a part of what they do now, I think is a great sign, and it's going to impact recruiting and all those other kind of things. And it's a very good sign in my opinion. You're muted, Vince. There you go.
You got another super chat. I was like, oh, I'm muted. From
Patrick. Yeah.
Patrick Barnes. Thank you, Patrick, for the super chat. Really appreciate it. Now that players can transfer so easily, do you think we will see a mass exodus of defensive players if Freeman takes the head coaching job after year 2? I think it'd be the exact opposite. I think that would cement them to stick. I mean, no, I do not see that. The short answer is I do not see that at all. Just because he wouldn't be the defensive coordinator. He's
saying if he takes a head coaching job, meaning he leaves Notre Dame.
Oh, I thought he meant the head coaching job.
No, if he leaves Notre Dame.
Well, that obviously changes my thought process. But no, I do not think there will be a mass exit. You might have 1 or 2 guys that leave or whatever, but I do not see there being a mass exodus. No.
And part of that's because of Notre Dame.
Right.
I mean,
exactly.
And look, what's Marcus Freeman's biggest selling point? And he said this before, and I've heard this from recruits. He's not saying, hey, come play for me because I'm the greatest coordinator ever, and I'm going to make you an NFL player. Right. The NFL part, but it's more of this is what Notre Dame can do for you. We can build you into, you know what I mean? And the thing he talked about during the show is he's like, Mike Elston's got to be the head coach of the defensive line. You know, Mike Mickens has got to be the head coach of the secondary. That would be a part too. But again, I'm going to go back to this again and say this is not a knock on Marcus Freeman. Some people took it that way when I would say it, and it's not. Mike Mickens landed a pretty good corner class before Marcus Freeman showed up.
Yep.
Right? Mike Elston's landed some, like all the defensive line. Marcus Freeman talked about how deep they are at the defensive line and how good they are. Guess what? You know how many of those guys he recruited? 0. Right? So he's taken it to another level. But these guys are coming to play for Mike Mickens. The defensive linemen are going to want to play for Mike Elston.
Sure.
As long as they're happy at Notre Dame, they're not going to leave.
Right.
They're just not.
Yeah.
Again, Vincent, you may get 1 or 2. Now, if he leaves and Notre Dame was coming off an 8-4 year, the new coordinator comes in and he's a jerk or whatever. I mean, sure, there could be something like that there, but it won't be just because Marcus Freeman left.
Right.
And that's also a testament to Marcus Freeman of how well he sold what makes Notre Dame special. It's not just me, it's us. And that's an important piece to this too.
Jojo jumping in. He says, I'm glad you guys had Coach Freeman on today. What an awesome interview. They need to keep it up at Notre Dame. That dude has the it factor for sure. I can hear Coach Freeman talk football anytime. So thank you.
Me too.
Yeah, I know, right? Ladarius, he says, I wonder why no one has hired Luke Fickell from Cincinnati.
You know something I think has hurt him, Vince? Is I think his experience at Ohio State, that 1 year at Ohio State, I think it hurt him. Because you remember he took over for Ohio State. He was the interim head coach in 2011. Remember when Jim Tressel got hired? Like, remember that? Or got fired right before the 2011 season? And Luke Fickell took over and they went 6-7. Now, I don't think he should get blamed for that. Because that was just a crazy year.
A weird situation.
Right.
And right.
But I think that's held against him, to be honest with you.
Wow.
And honestly, I think Luke Fickell's a really good football coach. But I do think there's something to the fact that sometimes guys are they're at their level. That's where they're best. And I kind of feel that when it comes to Luke Fickell on that level of Cincinnati. I think he could probably do well at like a Michigan State. But I don't know if he's a guy that, like, if Ryan Day left to go to the NFL next year, would Luke Fickell be the guy you'd really turn to? I don't know about that. But honestly, if they were going to go hire an alum, I think he'd probably get first crack at it over Marcus Freeman because he has experience as a head coach. And he actually coached at Ohio State for a long time on some really good teams under Urban Meyer and Jim Tressel. So that'd be interesting. Be very interesting. And we're going to learn a lot about Luke Fickell this year too. If that defense stays really good, then he's going to get a lot of credit for that. And then he'll start getting some of the credit for what they built in previous years too.
A lot of conversation about who takes over at Alabama after Nick Saban leaves, which is very interesting conversation there.
Where are you at?
I'm at 226 as I scroll.
Okay. I got a couple of these. I want to read one from your guy, your guy Victor here. Vince.
Okay,
I want to hear you answer this one.
Okay.
Hey Vince, Freeman is awesome. Personally, I believe we'll win a playoff game this year, and we'll take the next step due to the field. Please kill my hope. Love you guys. Keep up your good work. Coach
He wants me to kill his hope. I don't want to kill his hope. I have hope. I have the same hope, man. I really hope that Notre Dame can take the next step and win a playoff game. I mean, you and I, we did a podcast about, does Notre Dame have a legitimate chance at a national championship this year? And we spelled out all the different reasons why we think that's a possibility, right? So I think that there's an absolute possibility that Notre Dame can win that first round of the playoffs.
Sure. Matchups are always so important to that too.
Important. It's so important. And with where Clemson is, where Alabama is, where Ohio State is, lots of new quarterbacks, lots of new personnel. Like a lot of those guys are dealing with the same issues that Notre Dame's dealing with as far as replacing some personnel. So I like where Notre Dame is at. I think they've got a great opportunity. I'm sorry, Vic, I can't kill your hope, man, because I have the same hope. So
I got another comment I want to put up, Vince.
Yeah.
Mace AK, I'm at work, so I can't run through a wall, but listening to Freeman made me want to headbutt the secretary, just yell, "Go Irish." That's awesome. I just get the visual. I just got like the Terry Tate office linebacker visual of him just walking up and doing a headbutt of the secretary. Go Irish! That'd be hilarious.
Funny.
If we don't see Mace AK on the show for a while or on the message board because he signed up for the message board, we're gonna know that this actually happened. Yeah, and he's waiting on bail. So I appreciate that.
Wow,
I appreciate that.
Oh man,
yeah.
Here we go. Michael wants to know if you've got any intel on the visit of Hero Canoe.
Yeah, so it went really well. I mean, a lot of this is just going to be what we expect, but no, it went really well. Notre Dame had a chance to connect with him, build that connection. My understanding is that he plans on carrying his recruitment out for a while, which Notre Dame thinks is a good thing because they got on him so late with an offer. Now, Mike Elson had been recruiting him before, but there's a feeling now. It's kind of like what we had hoped, Vince. Can you have a good enough visit now where you kind of jump up to the top of his top three? And I believe Notre Dame is in that top three now coming out of that visit. I think they made themselves a legit player. And Notre Dame was smart too because they brought him on campus, but it wasn't just him. It was that whole group of international players.
Right.
So he was going to be comfortable. And then, of course, Alexander Ahrensberger, who's a teammate. I'm actually not sure. I think Alex was here for that. I believe he was here for that.
Okay.
But, I look, it went really well, right? That he sees where his fit is in this defense. He knows why they like him. He knows why they were able to continue to solidify why he didn't get an offer yet. And I think he's comfortable with that now. It was just, about room, where you kind of became a prospect at this time, but we had kind of already filled that up by that point in time. And I think that's where they're at with him. And so it went really well. They're going to be a player for him. They're going to have a really good shot with him. They just got to continue to build.
Right.
That's key. This isn't a situation where Notre Dame is now the team to beat. They're not. They're in a group of, in my opinion, 3 schools that are going to have the best shot to get him of his top 10, with Ohio State being one of them.
Lotus Scalper, and I know we've addressed this, but I wanted to kind of put up my spin on this as well. But he says, can you address Texas and Oklahoma in SEC? How will Notre Dame ever make the playoffs now?
Same reason they have every other time they've
right. It has nothing to do with it.
If anything, it helps them.
Yeah, the conversation I had with some guys yesterday, actually, off the air, obviously, was, with the SEC doing this and potentially the Big Ten doing that, and et cetera, then they're going to be playing 10 conference games with only 2 non-conference games. And why on earth would they ever want to schedule Notre Dame as one of those 2 non-conference games? And so Notre Dame's schedule is going to end up being watered down, and therefore they will never make the playoff because of their strength of schedule. What are your thoughts on that?
We talked a little bit about this yesterday, but I want to address this part of it first, Vince, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
First of all, how many playoff appearances does Texas have? The answer is 0. Oklahoma's made it 4 the last 6 years. You really think Oklahoma's going to be 11-1 every year playing in the SEC? No, they're not. How many times has there been 2 SEC teams in the playoff in the 7 years? So it's 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 7 years. How many times has there been 2 SEC teams in the playoff? Once. 2017, Georgia and Alabama.
Yep.
That's it. There's always this, because again, you all have to stop listening to ESPN. right? This whole SEC is going to get 2-3 teams is 100% driven by ESPN, and they're never right. I'm sorry. They were right once in 7 years, right? And they should have been right that year because Georgia and Alabama both deserve to be in that year. But it's kind of like, well, Georgia's going to get 2 losses. No, they're not. They weren't even close to getting in that year with 2 losses. The committee has done a good job of putting the 4 best teams in there. And they've put the 4 best teams in there sometimes when those teams don't have really good schedules, like, Clemson every year. So if Notre Dame's going to play at least 5 ACC teams every year, and they're going to play USC every year, right? So they're going to have 6 Power 5 games guaranteed, contractually guaranteed every year. We'll cross the whole 10-team conference thing when we get there. But I don't think that's going to necessarily hurt Notre Dame because there's still going to be plenty of teams that want to play Notre Dame. There's going to be plenty of Power 5 teams that want to play Notre Dame, plenty of top 25 caliber teams because those teams are going to know, hey, look, we're not Bama. So if we're the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th team in the SEC, we know we're not Bama. We're not going to get the benefit of the doubt Bama is. So we got to do something out of conference to try to build up our resume. Hey, let's go play Notre Dame. Notre Dame also has schedules in advance with a lot of these teams that I don't see getting canceled. Or if they do, they're going to have to pay Notre Dame a crap load of money.
Yeah, right.
So, we'll cross that bridge if we get there in regards to the 10 league thing. But a lot of that's going to be driven by what the playoff committee does. If they're going to say, hey, look, if you're going to play 10 conference games, that's fine, but you better show us something out of conference.
Right.
Like, don't think you can just beat yourselves up and get multiple teams in because, again, how did that work out for the SEC last year? Remember with A&M, right? We heard that all the last month of the season from ESPN. 2 SEC teams. A&M's going to get in. Blah, blah, blah. Did A&M get in the playoff last year? No, they did not. Because ESPN doesn't determine what the committee does. Thank God. Because there's so little good analysis at ESPN anymore. And it's the groupthink there just makes me want to hurl. So I just – you're also assuming, and I would argue incorrectly, that Oklahoma is going to still be just as good in the SEC. We don't know that. We don't know what the pods are going to look like. We don't know what the schedule's going to look like. Here's the other part, too. By the time this happens, most likely there's going to be like 1 year of a 4-team playoff. Within a year or 2 of them being in the league, assuming they go early, right? Because I'm predicting they go early. But if the Big 12 puts up a fight and doesn't let them out till 2025, by the time they are in the SEC, it's going to be a 12-team playoff. You're not going to have 9 SEC teams in the playoff. I know that's the paranoia that everybody thinks, but you're just not. And if Texas and Oklahoma become powers in that league, then what's going to happen is somebody else is going to take – A&M's going to take a step back, or LSU or Florida or Georgia, and it's going to be the same as it is now. And that's just the reality of it. So we need to get over this paranoia of feeling that the SEC is just going to dominate everything because that's what ESPN's telling us is going to happen. ESPN is wrong so often that it's not even funny. And yet they still drive the narrative, which kind of drives me nuts. But remember, it's Ohio State's definitely getting in 2018. They're 1 loss, and yeah, they're gonna ignore the game against Purdue because they were so good at it. Well, how'd that work out for all those analysts? Oh, Georgia's still going to get in. Oh, Georgia's this, Georgia's that. They deserve to be in. How'd that work out for them? Right? Michigan's got a chance to beat Ohio State and get in the playoff over Notre Dame. Yeah, how'd that work out for them? How many 60 what? What did they give up that year? I mean, they're just wrong so often, the analysts there, that I don't understand why we still do it, other than just they're the only really voice in town. I mean, Fox hasn't got to that point yet. And
right.
But yeah, they're just
Notre
Dame's still going to be a playoff team if they keep winning. Simple as that.
We got another super chat from Robert. He says, people are going to be shocked at how good their offense will be. What do you think about Amarian Walker staying with Notre Dame?
I have gotten no indication he's looking to go anywhere else. Every visit he went on this summer was part of a team visit. It was a team camp. It was him going to Alabama with his team and working out. It was him going to, LSU and Ole Miss with his team. All I can do is tell you what they tell us and what they tell Notre Dame, and what they have been adamant. No, we're not looking. Part of the reason is, from what I'm told from a couple sources, is Amorian and his family are really into the parts of Notre Dame that there is nothing Alabama and LSU can ever do to match it, and that's the academic piece. They understand that, yes, maybe those teams may be a little better football-wise, but my son's going to get a chance to go there and do something that they just can't offer him.
Right.
And that's a big piece to it now. Now, does that carry the day all the way to signing day? We'll have to wait and see.
Sure.
But from what I'm told, Notre Dame has – because, look, Notre Dame got nervous when he started making these visits and getting offers. Trust me, they reached out. They had conversations, and it was made very clear, hey, Coach, this is why he was there. It was with his team. Because what you have to understand is a lot of states, you can go to these camps as a team, and you can, like, work out together as a team. It's like a practice. I remember when I was at Bowling Green back when I was in my early coaching days, Vince, Mentor High School one year brought their whole flipping team. They brought like 4 or 5 buses to the Bowling Green camp, and they were literally on one of their practice fields, like working with just like it was like a practice, right? So that's kind of what you're doing is you're going there as a team to get work in.
Yeah,
that's every team does common. That, and that's common. What it was. And he was impressive enough in those visits. Right. In those workouts to earn offers, which is a great sign for Notre Dame. We'll see if it translates when there's pads on.
Right.
But I have gotten no indication Notre Dame has gotten any indication other than he's sold. And let's not forget, he visited Notre Dame after getting all those offers. I think that was a good sign too.
Another super chat from Matthew Edwards. Thank you, Matthew. Really appreciate the support. He says, what interaction is typical amongst coordinators? Are they siloed and rarely interact, or is there active engagement with cross-fertilization of ideas? I assume he means
question
between the offensive and the defensive coordinator.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
On good coaching staffs, there's a lot of cross-fertilization, so to speak. I used to do this all the time, with I've told you my friend of mine is coaches with Clark Lee now at Vanderbilt, and he was a DB coach when we coached together, and we would constantly be in each other's offices saying, hey, I'm trying to work on slant, this slant technique, and here's what I'm thinking about doing. You think that'll work or not? Well, here's the problem with that. If I'm playing inside leverage, I can do this, 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 or this, and then we'd work through it. And he'd do the same thing. Like, hey, when we're playing this team that runs a lot of slants, right? What are some things that really hurt your ability to do that? Okay, well here's some things to do. And so I think good coaches do that all the time. And from what I understand, Marcus Freeman and Tommy Rees do have those. Now, it's not something where you sit in each other's office every day, but you do make time to sit there and say, "Hey, look, man, we're," and I think especially when you get to fall camp, and if they're just killing us with the seam route, right? And then you sit there and talk like, "What are you seeing in our coverage that's making you want to go to that route?
Right?
What could we do to make you want to go away from that?" And you have those conversations, and that's what good coaches do. And I expect Tommy Rees and Marcus Freeman to do that. Now, once the season starts, you don't have as many of those conversations. Right. Once the season starts, it's kind of like, hey, we're doing our thing. You're right. Well, I got to focus. We got 3 practices this week. I got to focus on that.
Fall camp's
the off season.
Down.
Yeah. Well, a lot of it happens in my experiences during the winter and then post spring.
Yes.
And then you'll also have some of that to a degree in fall camp. But a lot of the big picture ideas where you just sit down and you're on the boards back and forth.
It's like, how would you defend this?
Happens in the
you know what I mean? Or how? That's why I was so. I don't know if impressed is the right word, but when you said that the one head coach you had who created his offensive playbook based on stuff that
Coach Donnelly,
he had a hard time defending as a defensive coordinator. Like that was like mind blowing. It just made so much sense. You know what I mean? So it's very interesting.
Yep. Hey Vince, where are you at? Because there's a
234.
There was a question down here at 217 I wanted to address. I thought
I
it was
keep
really
getting
good.
bumped when I go down and get
I know. Andrew Vanden Over asked this question: if Freeman does become the next guy, meaning head coach of Notre Dame, how much does that enhance Kelly's legacy? That's a great question because I think it enhances Kelly's legacy a lot.
Oh yeah.
If Freeman is successful, I think when you can build the program up to where one of your assistants can succeed you, that's a great sign of hey, we want to keep what you were doing going, right? You did a great job. We want to keep that going. And I think that's a great sign because it tells you that the people are happy with what we've built, not just on the field, but then also off the field. And then if Marcus Freeman has success, obviously Marcus Freeman would get credit for that. But I think it also would then enhance Brian Kelly's legacy because you left the program in great shape. You went out and got this guy. And then also, too, the manner in which Brian Kelly had to fight to get Marcus Freeman would add to that story, right? Yep. And so if Freeman had success, I think Brian Kelly would get who would and should get a lot of credit for that.
And going to Irish lore. Are you kidding me? Like that whole trip to LSU and like it would be Irish lore is what that would end up being if that was the case.
Brian Kelly, if Marcus Freeman goes to LSU, this doesn't happen. That kind of thing, which would be true. Yeah. So I
agree.
Yeah, I absolutely believe it would happen.
Benjamin says, if Notre Dame is forced to join the ACC, are you worried about our national reach from recruiting drying up?
To a degree, yeah, I am. That's one of the reasons I don't necessarily like being in a conference. Now, the good thing is a lot of the regions that Notre Dame would have access to because of being in the SEC, that's where you want to be anyway. I mean, your whole East Coast from, Maryland, Virginia, all the way down to Georgia, Florida. I mean, that's where a chunk of the talent's going to be, Right. Notre Dame's always going to be a national program, but I do think that it would hurt them a little bit unless they're absolutely dominant. Like right now, Ohio State is a regional school. They play it is still the most regional conference. Now that the Big 12, if the Big 12 breaks up, I think the Big 10 becomes the most regionalized conference, in my opinion. Not necessarily geographically, but just perception-wise, they can go anywhere they want and get kids. Ohio State can, right? I mean, they can recruit nationally. So Notre Dame would have to be pretty good, but they could still recruit nationally, but I do think it would hurt the whole national thing a little bit. But that's also why it's important to still have USC as your rival, because that still allows you to kind of have that West Coast appeal.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Hey, Brian from Michael. He says, where do things currently stand with 23 tight end Jackson Howard? I know you're high on him. He says, if ND is taking only one tight end in that class, I prefer this very talented individual.
I mean, look, Mike, with a lot of these 2023 kids, you can just insert the following line. They're on him. They like him. He likes them, but it's early.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I'm not trying to be a jerk, but like I'm looking at the top, the top 100 guys of, I'm going to pull it up here. I'm going to pull up the top 247 composite list. And we'll kind of go through how many kids are actually committed. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 of the top 50. 5
are committed.
Yeah, 6. 6 of the top 100 players are currently committed in the 2023. They're not even juniors in high school yet, right? So it's early. It's very early. Notre Dame getting 2 top players was kind of not expected. Okay. So it's going to take some time, and it's early yet. They've had these kids on campus once, right? They're going to get it back in the fall and all those kind of things. Now, is Notre Dame in a really good position there early on? Sure. But it's going to take some time. Jackson is one of 2 tight ends that I want in this class. And to me, if I'm Notre Dame, I'm recruiting 2 kids at tight end. That's it. And I'm taking the first one that wants to come. Jackson is the better recruit now. Deuce Robinson is the other one from same high school as Tosh Baker. He's the one with the greater ceiling. You get either one of those guys, it's a win. It's not a win. It's like a convincing win. It's a huge pickup. But neither of them are going to be committing tomorrow. And so it's a process. And so I like where Notre Dame is at with both. They need John McNulty to be all over those 2 kids and get one of them. That's the key. That's the key.
Beer Belly, he says, I would love to hear more about Prince Colley and his role in this year's defense and moving forward. Go Irish.
I would encourage you there, Beer Belly, to if you haven't signed up for the Irish Breakdown message board, it's a phenomenal name. I would encourage you to do so. I'm going to have some reports over the next week. I've talked to a bunch of different sources. I got a lot of good intel. And I'm confident that there's going to be a lot of information that you're going to like in there. Okay. And Prince Colley will be one of those topics of conversation. But let's just say that Prince has been everything they'd hoped he would be from an athletic standpoint. And that's not meant to be any kind of offhanded comment or, what is the secret meaning? No, it means exactly what I said.
Yeah.
You never know how a kid's going to look physically until he shows up. Right. Yeah. But athletically, he's a little bigger, I think, than they expected. So meaning like filled out, like ripped up than they expected. But athletically, there's a lot to be impressed with. But he hasn't had one practice in a Notre Dame uniform yet.
Right,
so,
exactly.
That's the thing is that we don't know what his role is going to be.
Right.
Right. We won't know that till he puts pads on. But athletically, there's a lot to like there. Beyond what just they expected from high school film, I'm talking about just what they've seen in workouts so far.
Here's a really good question from Benjamin. He says, Coach, you talk about your grading system being a way to properly value various skills and remove bias from the equation. Since the game constantly evolves, how often do you update your grading system?
It just depends on how often I view that it needs to change, how I feel like the grading system is not allowing me to properly evaluate. But I'll say this, the game evolving doesn't necessarily change my grading system. All it does is I may take certain parts into the equation. So, for example, RPOs weren't around as like they are now 10 years ago, right? They weren't there. So I didn't evaluate RPOs as part of a quarterback's grade. If you do it now, I don't need to have a different grading system. I just need to add, as part of decision making that I already evaluated, the new concepts that need to be evaluated, the new technique that goes into executing an RPO. But I was already grading technique. I was already grading decision-making, making reads and getting the ball out quickly. It's just all those things are happening with different concepts now.
Sure.
So those things are always evolving, like yearly. But the actual grading, okay, athleticism, you're either athletic or you're not, right? Arm strength, okay? You either have a big arm or you don't. Mechanics, right? Those things are always going to matter. What system are your mechanics being used for? That's going to change. But evaluating mechanics doesn't change. So it's a very good question, Benjamin. So what I would say changes, my grading system doesn't change much, but what does change is I also have a thing for each position group where, if I was like, hey, Vince, I want you to check out this running back and write a film breakdown, I could copy and paste the 10 different, bullet points that I have that say, hey, I want you to evaluate his athleticism, and here's the things I'm looking for. Foot quickness, change of direction,
right,
lateral quickness, explosiveness, first step burst, acceleration, all these type of things I want you to look for. That part's always evolving because there's more things involved now. So like 10 years ago, I wouldn't have really cared if a defensive end has the ability to drop into coverage. Well, more and more teams are doing that now. So I've had to add that to that piece of it, and those things will factor in, but it doesn't necessarily change the grade. But I'd say probably every 4 or 5 years, I'll tinker with it. There was a stretch there where I did it 3 years in a row as I don't want to say perfecting it because I don't think I'm not saying it's perfect, but as I was really getting it to where I felt it was running how I was like, okay, I feel good about where I'm at with this now. Probably about 3 years where I was just continue to tinker with it. Good question.
Yeah, really good question.
Did we have another super chat down there, Vince?
I don't think so, but okay. You can go ahead and go down and take a look if you want.
I'm down. I thought I saw another one from Old Grim, but I might have missed that one. I could be wrong on that. Okay. No, I think I was wrong on that.
Got one from Laker Irish. Does the Notre Dame football team utilize a lot of analytics/statistics like PFF, etc.?
Yeah. Now they use there's two PFF entities. There's the public one, which is the one we see, which is garbage. Then there's the one that's behind the scenes, which is made up of a bunch of former coaches.
Right.
The public one is just these dudes that they hire and they do whatever that they do, which is kind of ridiculous. The former coaches, players, real analysts, and things like that, they're sending a completely different product to the teams than what we see. So yeah, they use stuff like that. But then also there's the analytics that you put together as a staff. So yeah, they use it. I don't think Notre Dame obsesses over analytics, which I think is smart.
Yeah.
Especially at the college level. It's like I was made aware of this platform. I won't say their name, but like they do analytics for high school kids, and it's based on on-field evaluation of their physical skills and their production in high school. It's like you're going to compare production of kids from high school. Like that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of because there's like 1,000 schools and there's so much. I mean, I recruited kids to Defiance College that had over 4,500 rushing yards and 50 touchdowns. Right. So see a 5-star recruit. I mean, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
It's just it's so bad. But I think analytics are even more important in the NFL because the sample of teams you're evaluating is smaller. There's more crossover in the NFL. This team played this team and that team played that team and this team played that team because there's only 32 teams. Right. It's a lot harder to do that when there's 120 teams, or even if you look at the Power 5, which is just 65 teams. There's so many more data points that have to be considered, that the analytics have to be taken with the right looked at the right way, that you can't necessarily do that. It's a lot harder to do than it is, for example, in the NFL, where there's just a smaller number of teams and players. Plus, guys play on different teams so much. Like, this guy may be on this team, but we've seen him play in the NFL before, whereas in high school or college, there's so much more turnover on a yearly basis, in my opinion.
Let's see. We got lots of comment. You guys are active today in the comment section. I will give you a lot of credit here. Somebody wanted to know how. Okay, here we go. Ryan Michael says, how many 22 kids do you think have a legitimate chance of committing in August other than CJ?
I think I wouldn't go past 3, including CJ. I'd say maybe 3 would be the most. And I'm not even guaranteed that that's going to happen. I think 3 kids could make a decision this summer. If somebody else, if more did, it would be a surprise. And I don't mean just committing Notre Dame, committing period. Like, I don't see Anthony Lucas deciding this summer. I don't see Hero Canoe deciding this summer. I don't see Cyrus Moss deciding this summer. I don't see Xavier Nwankpa deciding this summer. I don't see Zach Rice deciding this summer. I don't see Emil Wagner deciding this summer. I think the potential guys that could commit is CJ, Tobias, and Billy Schrauth. Now, it's not guaranteed that any of them. I mean, CJ's the only guy that's guaranteed to commit this summer, right?
Right, because he set a date.
Those 2 have been more fluid. They may commit sooner. There's still some back and forth. The other guys are. It would be a surprise if those other guys committed to anybody.
James Bennison has an interesting one. He says, why haven't more of the quote-unquote big boys decided to go independent? Bama could do the same thing as Notre Dame. Texas could do the same thing, as well as Clemson.
I was kind of with them until the last one.
Clemson, guys got to remember, Clemson doesn't have much of a history.
Clemson's a great football team now, but again, it's not about the football team. Notre Dame remained independent for 20-some years when they sucked.
Right.
It's a different animal. I think part of the reason Notre Dame can do it, and I'm not sure others can, is because Notre Dame is not a regional school. And what I mean by that is, obviously it's a regional school geographically, but Notre Dame has such a greater reach. And I'm not talking about football players or football talent. I'm talking about people that are going to give you money and have interest in you. Notre Dame has such a tremendous reach. And this gets into the brand conversation we had yesterday. Alabama could do it now, but would Alabama have been able to do it during the Mike Du Bois and Mike Shula eras?
Yeah, right.
Would there still have been the national reach? Otherwise, it's just a regional school when they're not good. Right. And so being a national powerhouse on the field doesn't make you a national powerhouse when it comes to that. Now, I actually think more teams could thrive independent, right? If you just look at their revenue and things like that. But the reason that a lot of these teams joined leagues is because of the TV money. And that's the reason Texas and Oklahoma are going there. It's the TV money. Sure. Here's the thing you have to remember. Notre Dame doesn't need TV money to be successful. There's a lot of people that have convinced themselves that they need the TV money. Texas makes more money than any school in America, and they're still convincing themselves they have to make more money. They're basically committing suicide as a football program by joining the Big 12. Joining the SEC. But for them, it doesn't matter because they're going to get the money.
Right.
Whereas, I just feel like Notre Dame has never bought that lie that we need the TV money, because they generate money in so many different ways, not just sports related. And that's why Notre Dame has been able to do it. Nobody else is going to go independent and take a $15 million TV deal that Notre Dame has. Do you think Ohio State is going to turn down a 54? They're making isn't it like the last number was 54 million for the Big Ten? Do you think they're going to go, for Ohio State? Or for Big Ten teams, do you think a team from that league is going to say, no, we're going to turn that down and take an NBC contract for $15 million a year? No, they're not going to do that. Right. And now Notre Dame gets more than that because they get about $7 million from the ACC, right? So they're about $22 million. Every single Power 5 team in America makes more than $22 million off TV money.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Notre Dame's we're not going to be defined by that.
One. They were the first one.
Well, at the time, Notre Dame was huge. That was the big deal. But it's gotten out of hand. But Notre Dame has not jumped on we need that TV money, because they're making money in so many different ways. I think Texas could do it. I think Bama could do it if they. But see, I don't know if Bama should do it though, because to me, part of what makes Bama is the ancient rivalries with all those SEC teams, Tennessee, Auburn. Why does Alabama doesn't need to go independent? I think a team like USC should consider it. I think a team like Texas should. If you're that unhappy with the Big 12 and you think you're this great program, then go independent. Do it that way. But the Longhorn Network wasn't as successful as they thought it was going to be. That's the thing. Texas thought they could really go independent. They were basically an independent team in a conference. The way that they tried to do the whole Longhorn Network. It didn't work. To the degree that they had hoped it would work. So I just, if I was running out Alabama, I wouldn't want to join the league.
Right.
I mean, I wouldn't want to join independent. I'd say, look, but our history is in the SEC. We are a founding member of the SEC. I mean, I don't know if they're a founding member, but like we've been in it our entire time. Like all of our rivalries are in this league. Why would they want to go independent? Whereas Texas now, what rivalry do they have in the SEC other than Oklahoma? Like, it's dumb. I mean, yeah. I think USC should consider it. I think that Texas should have considered it. I don't know if it would make a lot of sense for a lot of those other power teams, to be completely honest with you.
DJ Wilson, Brian and Vince, are you guys able to attend practices this year? We actually just got notification that which practices are open, which ones. So how Notre Dame does it. You get a couple that are completely open, like the whole thing. And then you get a couple where you can only see like the first 30 minutes. You get like 15 minutes of stretching and then like 15 minutes of drills. And then you got to leave.
Right.
So we just got that information. So we're kind of putting together our schedule and kind of how we're going to do that. But yes,
full disclosure, I won't be attending any practices this year. Vince will. So just, I don't want it to mislead to people think that I'm going to be at practice this year. I'm not going to be at practices this year unless things change in ways that I have no control over.
Right.
I won't be attending practices this year.
Yeah. So we're going to try to do
There's only 2 full practices. I'm sorry to interrupt. 2 full practices.
2 full. And I want to say 3 or 4 of the 30-minute.
There's not going to be a ton of practice access this year.
Right. Because usually we get way more than that.
Right. And I think this is Notre Dame kind of throwing a bone to the media because I think there was a push from some at Notre Dame. I'm not talking coaches, to not have any access at all because they don't want people that aren't in their bubble around players because there's still the COVID fears and things like that. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm not trying to jump into that political conversation. I'm just saying that was a push from some around the school, not coaches. I think this is actually Brian Kelly saying, no, we want to be open based on some things I've heard. I think Brian Kelly had every opportunity to say, you know what, we're being told not to have anybody at practices. So we're going to do that.
Right.
But I think he's sort of trying to find a middle ground to do that. So
there's 2 completely open and then 4 first 30-minute practices. So we will see how those go. And like I said, we will try to bring you guys the best coverage possible about those. And because I'm excited too. I mean, I get to see something. So anyway, moving forward.
Where are you at, Vince?
I am down at 313, so I'm getting close. A lot of conversation about the SEC and why it's the SEC, and somebody in there said Notre Dame needs to join the SEC.
But why? It's not going to happen.
Never.
It's not going to happen. No, Notre Dame would never, ever, ever join the SEC. There's this meme going, or it's just this graph going around. I think it's hilarious, and it says SEC, and then underneath is like the logo for like every school in the country. And then independent Notre Dame. Yeah, that's exactly what would happen if every other team joined the SEC. Notre Dame would still be independent.
Right.
They're not joining the SEC. It's just not going to happen.
Not going to happen.
Nor should they. It's the Southeastern Conference. Right. Notre Dame is closer to Canada than it is any team in the SEC.
That's true.
Okay?
It's true. That is true. Huron, love you guys. Thanks for all the great analysis and conversation. Love having you, Huron. Thank you for that. Really appreciate it. People talking about the Notre Dame basketball team, which is great. You can definitely go over to the message board because there is a Notre Dame basketball room, that you can chat about Notre Dame basketball for sure. Let's see.
This is why I love Notre Dame fans right here, and he's not alone. I have a buddy who did the same thing with his brother. Terry Howie says, I missed my brother's wedding for Notre Dame football, and I was best man. A good friend of mine also missed his brother's wedding for a Notre Dame football game against like Michigan State. It wasn't even like the title game. It was Michigan State.
See, I got married in August, and so there was no Notre Dame football. That was a must, obviously. And then number 2, but the Cubs were playing, and it turned out that Greg Maddux won his 300th game on my wedding day. Yeah. So that's why I will always remember. And the TV was on.
And you're a Cubs fan, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah. The TV was on.
And that's relevant. Greg Maddux winning 300 is relevant to you as a Cubs fan because that's correct. Who he started with.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely relevant. So, and he was a Cub when he did it too.
DJ Wilson, I second Brian's advice. Stop listening to ESPN.
I saw that.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Here we go. Jeff Fluke says, dang you, coach. Your tweet about Tobias finally made me cave and join the message board. Happy to be a part of the team.
Why did you have to cave, man? You'll be part of our community, right? You only want to do the free stuff, right? Like, come on, man. You gotta be part of all in, man. We need you to be all in. All in.
This is great.
And I'm happy to have you as a part of the team as well.
Absolutely. Felix Fournier, can Nolan Ziegler play safety at the college level with the scheme change in the great 22 class, plus a few more studs probably joining the 23 class? Is it getting too crowded at the linebacker position?
No. You got to think they signed 2 linebackers in last year's class. One of them's going to go on a Mormon mission in a year. They signed a grand total of 0 linebackers in the 2020 class. So, no, it's not getting too crowded. Plus, this is a defense that can play 4 linebackers. We talked about that in the interview with Coach Freeman about, there are going to be times they're going to be in 3-4 personnel. That's 4 linebackers. So, no, I don't know if he can play safety. I think he's going to outgrow safety real fast.
Yeah.
So, I would not really consider him a safety. Would I say, hey, let's give him a shot first fall, because Nolan's going to be an early enrollee. Let's give him a shot the first spring, see if he can play. You want to do that for a couple weeks? I'd be fine with that. And then if he can play it, okay, great. But I would imagine he would quickly, Yeah. Yeah.
AJ says, let's say you have 2 coaches at equal level programs who both put in the work and grind equally as hard as one another on the recruiting trail. What specifically goes into making one coach better than the other in terms of closing the deal on a recruit? I would say, now you've been on the recruiting trail, you've been a recruiting coordinator, but for me, I'm going to say it's personal relationships. You can grind and you can call and you can do everything, but if you can't make that connection with a kid, it doesn't matter. It's not the communication, it's the type of communication. I will say that.
And I would say that relationship isn't about like, man, we have a lot of music in common. I can talk Wu-Tang with them.
Right.
We like the same movies. It's a relationship in regards to, do you trust me or not? Do you think that when and also it's also with the parents too, but you're entrusting your future to me. That's what this connection really is.
Right.
Your future. And at this level, it's a future that could result in, if you make the wrong decision, millions of dollars in either getting or not getting. That's a lot. I got to trust that you're going to do right by me. You're going to push me when I need to be pushed. You're going to love me when I need to be loved. You're going to be honest with me all the time. And that's what it comes down to. It's not kids that make decisions because, man, that coach is cool. That's a terrible reason to make a decision.
Yeah,
I don't care if he's cool or not. Is he gonna do the things I talked about?
Right.
And most kids I've had kids call me, Vince, crying because they're telling me they're going to another school because we just connected like this. But at the end of the day, like one time I lost a kid to Johns Hopkins. I get it. You're going to Johns Hopkins. I was like, buddy, you don't have to. But he was like crying. 235-pound fullback was crying because he didn't want to tell me no. I was like, man, look, you got to do what's best for you, right? But like,
exactly, and that's
the connection can only take. But we had a great personal connection, but clearly there was something that he wanted that I couldn't offer him at my school. As good as my school was, I couldn't offer him Johns Hopkins.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Exactly.
So even the personal relationship at the end of the day, you got to have something behind it. Like you could love. I get along so well with the running back coach at Georgia Tech.
Right.
Or Kentucky, but I'm still not picking his school over Alabama or Ohio State or Notre Dame, right? Notre Dame has a receiver on their roster now who said, man, I won't name the coach because I shouldn't even said receiver, but he said, if this coach was at a bigger school, that's where my kid would have gone because that relationship was so big. But he also understood that but that coach is at that school. And I want to go play at Notre Dame.
Sure. Absolutely.
So there's more to it than just a relationship. But if you have if we're talking about,
but the question you said,
two people in the same school.
Yeah,
right. It's the relationship part.
Yeah. Yep. Rob has a very interesting question here. He says, Brian and Vince, would you like to see at some point a Thursday or Friday night game in South Bend?
No.
For me personally, since you're asking us individually, for me personally, that's a terrible idea because I'm very involved in high school football, like from a media standpoint. I do radio, for high school football. Those are all on Friday nights, right? And then again, from a personal standpoint, my kid's going to be playing on Thursday nights. So no, absolutely not. I do not like that in any way. Sorry, Notre Dame football's on Saturdays, and that's just the way it needs to be. So,
well, I mean, there's a Sunday game coming up, and we've seen Monday games.
But it's not at Notre Dame,
right? You gave your answer. I was giving mine. I wasn't trying to contradict what you were saying. Vince.
My bad.
What I was saying for me is, we've seen some Sunday games, see some Monday games that are at the beginning of the year. And those don't necessarily bother me because it's a spotlight game, like it was Louisville in 2019. It was on a Monday night, right? And Florida State this year on the Sunday. That doesn't bother me. And honestly, I wouldn't even be opposed to a Thursday or a Friday night game if it was like the end of August, kick the season off thing. It wouldn't bother me, but I wouldn't love it. I just think Saturdays for college football. Like one thing I hate about the NFL is is there like a game on every freaking day now?
Pretty close. Like Monday, Thursday, Sunday for sure. I mean, that's 3 out of the
yeah. I mean, it's just like I want to see. The only time I don't want to watch an NFL game on a Sunday is if it's a Monday night game or on Thanksgiving. That's just my personal opinion. College football is a Saturday thing. I get why the MAC does it, and it's actually smart because otherwise no one's going to watch. If the MAC only played on Saturday, I'd never watch a MAC game unless they're playing Notre Dame. The fact that they have MACtion on Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays means I'm going to watch the MAC.
Yeah.
But that's the MAC. That's
right.
That's not Notre Dame.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, with you. We're talking about getting married and things of that nature with Notre Dame football going on. It moved on me. There we go. Keegan McLaughlin says, we are getting married next year, and she's an Ohio State alumni / fan. Sorry, man. She made a great decision and said, let's get married in the spring. I can't wait to rub every obnoxious Ohio State fan's nose in it coming.
Is there another part to that?
No.
Okay.
There's not. I know it felt like there was a little more to that, but hey, getting married in the spring, always a smart.
You must really love that woman if you're marrying an Ohio State fan. You must really. She must be pretty special.
Yeah. AJ has a hypothetical, and we're getting to the bottom here. Brian, he says, if God came to you in a vision and guaranteed you a Notre Dame national champion title or national title win in 2021, and you had to pick one Michigan player in the past that you would have loved to see play for Notre Dame, who would you pick?
Denard Robinson.
That was going to be my answer too.
I love Denard. Okay, so that would be my recent one. If I could go back in the past. Charles Woodson. I mean,
that'd be a hard
one. You've
seen
seen Charles Woodson playing at Notre Dame. Of course, Bob Davie would have ruined him. But
he would have never won the Heisman Trophy.
No.
Yeah, no chance.
But yeah, Charles Woodson would have been one. I loved watching Charles Woodson. Full disclosure, my freshman year, I moved to receiver. My freshman year of college was 1998. That was kind of a big year for Charles Woodson. I'm not gonna lie. I wore my wristbands around my elbows like Charles Woodson did. Not gonna lie. I was a quarterback, man. Like I moved to receiver, but I was a quarterback at heart. Like, right, look good, feel good, play good.
Yeah, man. Right.
So yeah, I did. Yeah, I had the wristbands around my elbow like Charles Woodson did. He was a phenomenal player.
Yeah. Searcher Green, great point. I love the Thursday night college game. Just don't want to see Notre Dame in it.
Yeah. I want to see teams I don't get to see normally.
Right. I love watching football. I turn it on. I'm watching football. I just don't want to be working that game. I don't want to watch Notre Dame that game. Like I want to watch football. So I'm with you on that one. Ladarius says, why doesn't Notre Dame have many night games? Well, they do when they're on the road. They have a bunch because
almost always.
And when they're at home this year, they've got 2 and they're back to back, North Carolina and USC. In October. So they actually have I bet more than half their schedule they're going to be night games this year.
It'll end up being that way.
Yeah.
Now they don't have a lot of home night games, but that's more of a tradition thing. You know, it's like that 3:30 afternoon slot. It's like they play more night games than they play noon games. You know,
Yo, absolutely.
they'll never have noon home games, but it's a tradition thing. You know, and I think there's a lot that goes into it as well as, you know, especially road games. I think the night games are tough then too because they get on a plane and fly back
right
after
they don't
the game.
stay. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it kind of, then you're getting in late, and then you got treatment in the morning. It can throw off your whole schedule, especially for Notre Dame because they're not driving from Tuscaloosa to Auburn, right? They're going from South Bend to San Francisco or South Bend to Miami, or you know what I mean. So it makes a little bit
because right now 3 of the 12 games are night games that we know of, right? And
Florida State,
Florida State, USC, and North Carolina, and you know that
Virginia Tech's going to be a night game. You know that's going to be a night game. The one that we know is going to be noon though is going to be the
Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And that's horrible.
Yeah, but that's a Big Ten thing. Because Fox is going to carry that game, and Fox always has their big, their
spotlight
big game
games at noon.
Right.
That's tough. That's tough when I have a radio show that starts at 7 a.m. now. With 6 a.m. Chicago time.
Yeah, by the way, don't ask me to be on the show that day. FYI. I'll be sleeping that morning.
No problem. I think that's it, unless you have one that you want to throw up, Brian. I think that we have reached the end. So,
well, hey, I appreciate Jeff Fluke joining the Irish Breakdown message board. I do. We had 3 people sign up while we were doing the show. I would love for all of y'all to be a part of it. And look, and if you are a part of it, but you're just a lurker, totally respect that. But don't be afraid to jump in and ask questions on the board, right? Like right now, people are just kind of reading and liking. But if you have a question for me, and do it during the show. But if you can't ask it during the podcast, if you're someone who says, hey, I can't be a part of the live chats, how do I get a question in? Well, now it's easy. You go to the message board, right? Ask a question. We'll answer it. We'll engage with you. It's meant to be fun. It's meant to be interactive. And I want more people to be a part of it and keep growing and get more engaged. And that's a lot of the fun of what we say. But I want to appreciate everybody for joining us today too. And hopefully you like that interview from Coach Freeman. What's up, Vince?
Got one last one. I missed over this last time. Emma was asking about Bradshaw.
She asked earlier and we answered it. Yeah. Okay. So Emma, we just said he's plans on visiting for one of the September games.
Right.
I would imagine Toledo or Purdue.
Just want to make sure she got her question answered.
Yeah.
So
we answered that earlier as well.
That is it.
So, all right. Well, thanks everybody so much for being a part of the show today. We'll be back tomorrow. And if you have a question, when we stop this show and you're like, man, I wish I would have asked that question. The good news for you is tomorrow, that's all our show is going to be about.
It's Friday free for all, baby. The mailbag.
Asking questions. Vince's biggest day of the week, favorite day of the week. So we'll have plenty of time to answer more and more questions tomorrow. So everyone that signed up for the show, appreciate you. And don't forget, we've got that new Built Bar deal. You can see the link down below. If you go to Built Bar, use promo code Irish Breakdown, one word. The one they sent me was all caps, so doesn't hurt to try it that way. But I went and made an order last night to see if it worked, and it did. So I got my 10% discount. So my wife is very happy. I'm very happy. Vince is not happy yet because he hasn't tried one yet. But he's coming over after the show, and I'm going to give him one of them, the mint chocolate ones that I've bought. So it's really good. So yeah.
Fired up.
So we're excited about that. So that's something that we do for y'all. And just, again, it's a product that I actually love. It's the only reason I sought them out. I sought them out. They didn't seek us out. I sought them out because I
that's
love
one
the
thing.
Product.
If we're ever going to do any kind of partnership or something, it's going to be a product that we
it's going to be rare.
We love, and that we're
not going to start a show with like 8 different plugs.
Right. It's not who we are.
Yeah. But this one is one that I really like, and so we'll have that in the link below. I'll be tweeting about these and putting these things on Facebook from time to time. But I really wanted to get that to you all first, so you all are the first ones to know. The people in our live broadcasts on YouTube are the first ones to know about that deal. Well, second, my wife or my mom knew about it because she's like, I told her, I was like, I'm going to try to do it. And she's like, well, I want to make a Built Bar order, but I can't because I want to see if you get. I'm like, just go get your. No, I want to wait to find out. So I told her last night that we did it. She was all fired up. So she's going to order a bunch of Built Bar stuff today. But yeah, they're really good. And if you like candy bars, then you'll definitely want to get these because these are like a way healthier version of it. They like literally taste like candy bars. I'll never buy another candy bar again in my life. And they're healthy. So they're definitely a lot of positives. So anyway, for Vince, I'm Brian. That's Vince. I'm Brian. Thanks for joining us today. We'll talk to you all again very, very soon, meaning tomorrow. Have a good day.